My mother hasn't been the same since I found an old recipe book. When I got the call that my uncle had been arrested again, I wasn't surprised. He was charming, reckless, and unpredictable. The kind of guy who knew his way around trouble and didn't seem to mind it. But this time felt different. It wasn't just a few months. He was facing 10 years, a decade behind bars for possession of over a pound of cocaine. They said it was hidden in the trunk of his car, packed away as casually as groceries. It stung. He'd promised us he was clean, that his wild years were behind him. Even at Thanksgiving, he'd go out of his way to remind us all that he was on the straight and narrow. We'd had our doubts. Old habits don't vanish overnight after all. But a pound. None of us had seen that coming. My uncle swore up and down the drugs weren't his. Said he was framed, that someone wanted to see him gone for good. But when we pressed him on it, he'd just clam up, muttering that spending a decade locked away was better than what they would do to him. After he was sentenced, my mom called, her voice tight, asking if I could go to his place and sort through his things. It was typical family duty, the kind of thing I couldn't turn down. I wasn't close with him, but family ties run deep enough to leave you feeling responsible, even when you know you shouldn't. So, with him locked away for the next 10 years, I volunteered to clear out his apartment, move his things to storage. I didn't know why I was so eager, but maybe I felt like it was the least I could do. The place was a disaster, exactly as I expected. His kitchen cupboards were filled with thrift store pots and pans, each one more scratched and mismatched than the last. I could see him at the stove, cigarette dangling from his lips, stirring whatever random meal he'd thrown together in those beat-up pans. The living room was its own kind of graveyard. Ashtrays covered nearly every surface, filled with weeks' worth of cigarette butts. And the walls were a deep, sickly yellow from years of constant smoke. Even the light switches had turned the same shade, crusted over from the nasty habit that had stained every inch of the place. It was clear he hadn't cracked a window in years. I found myself running my fingers along the walls, almost wondering if the yellow residue would come off. It did. In one corner of the room was his pride and joy, a collection of Star Trek figurines and posters, lined up on a crooked shelf. Had likely hammered up himself. He'd been a fan for as long as I could remember, always rambling about episodes I'd never seen, and characters I couldn't name. Dozens of plastic figures with blank, determined stares watched me pack up their home. My uncle's treasures boxed up and ready to be hidden away for who knew how long. It took a few days, but I finally got the majority of the place packed. 3 trips in my truck, hauling boxes and crates to the storage facility across town, until the apartment was stripped bare. The only things left were the thin carpet, the nicotine-coated walls, and the broken blinds barely hanging in the windows. There was no way he was getting his security deposit back. The damage was practically baked into the place. But it didn't matter anymore. As I sorted through the last of the kitchen, my hand brushed against something tucked away in the shadows of the cabinet. I pulled it out and found myself holding a small, leather-bound book. The cover was cracked and worn, the leather soft from age, with a faint smell of cigarette smoke clinging to it. The pages inside were yellowed, brittle, and marked with years of kitchen chaos, stains, smudges, and scribbled notes everywhere. The entries were scattered, written down in no particular order, almost as if whoever kept this book had jotted recipes down the moment they'd been created, without thought of organization. As I skimmed the pages, a feeling crept over me that this book might have belonged to my grandfather. He was the one who'd brought the family together, year after year, with his homemade dishes. Every holiday felt anchored by the meals he'd cooked, recipes no one had ever been able to quite replicate. This book could very well hold the secrets to those meals, a piece of him that had somehow made its way into my uncle's hands after my grandfather passed. And yet, I couldn't shake a strange sense of dread as I held it. The leather was cold against my hands, almost damp, and a chill worked its way through me as I turned the pages. It felt wrong, somehow, as if there was more in this book than family recipes. Curious about the book's origins, I brought it to my mom. She took one look at the looping handwriting on the yellowed pages and nodded, her face softening with recognition. "This was your grandfather's," she said almost reverently, tracing her fingers along the ink. She hadn't seen it in years, and when I told her where I'd found it, a look of surprise flickered across her face. She had been searching for the book for ages and had never realized her brother had kept it all this time. As she flipped through the pages, nostalgia mingled with something else, maybe a touch of sadness or reverence. I could tell this book meant a lot to her, which only strengthened my resolve to preserve it. Could I hang on to it a little longer? I asked. I want to scan it, make a digital copy for myself so we don't lose any of his recipes. My mom agreed without hesitation, grateful that I was taking the time to safeguard something she hadn't known was still around. So I got to work. Over the next few weeks, in the gaps of my day-to-day life, I carefully scanned each page. I wasn't too focused on the content itself, more concerned with making sure each recipe was clear and legible, and didn't pay close attention to the strange ingredients and odd notes scattered throughout. My only goal was to make the text accessible, giving life to a digital copy that would be preserved indefinitely. Once I finished, I spent a few hours merging the scanned images, piecing them together to create a seamless digital version. When it was finally done, I returned the original to my mom, feeling a strange mix of relief and satisfaction. The family recipes were now safe, and I thought that was the end of it. But that sense of unease I'd felt in the kitchen, holding that worn leather cover, lingered longer than I expected. In the months that followed, I didn't think much about the recipe book. Scanning it had been a small side project, the kind I'd meant to follow up on by actually cooking a few of my grandfather's old dishes. But like so many side projects, I got wrapped up in other things and the book's contents drifted to the back of my mind, filed away and forgotten. Then Thanksgiving rolled around. I made my way to my parents' place, expecting the usual turkey stuffing and the familiar spread that had become tradition. When I got there though, I noticed something different right away. A large bird sat in the middle of the table, roasted to perfection, but something about it didn't look right. It was too small for a turkey and its skin looked darker, almost rougher than the golden brown I was used to. "Nice chicken," I said, figuring they'd switched things up for a change. My mom just shook her head. "It's not a chicken," she said quietly. "It's a hen." I gave her a confused look. "What's the difference?" I asked, half laughing, expecting her to shrug it off with a quick explanation. Instead, she just stared at me, her eyes unfocused as if she were lost in thought. For a moment, her face seemed distant, almost blank, as though I'd asked a question she couldn't quite place. Then, suddenly, she blinked, her gaze snapping back to me. "It's just what the recipe called for," she said, a strange edge to her voice. Something about it made the hair on my arms prickle, but I pushed the feeling aside, figuring she'd just been caught up in the cooking chaos. Yet, as I looked at the bird again, a small flicker of unease crept in, settling in the back of my mind like an itch I couldn't scratch. After dinner, I pulled my dad aside in the kitchen while my mom finished clearing the table. "What's the deal with Mom tonight?" I asked, keeping my voice low. He just shrugged, brushing it off with a wave of his hand. "You know how your mother is," he said with a small smile, as though her strange excitement was just one of those quirks. He didn't give it a second thought, already moving on, but I couldn't shake the weirdness. The whole meal had been off. The hen, unlike we'd had before, was coated in a sweet-smelling sauce that seemed to have a faint hint of walnut to it, almost masking its pale, ashen hue. The bird lay on a bed of unfamiliar greens, probably some sort of garnish, alongside perfectly sliced parsnips and radishes that seemed too neatly arranged, like it was all meant to look a certain way. The whole thing was far too elaborate for my mom's usual Thanksgiving stuff. When she finally sat, she led us in saying grace, her voice soft and reverent. As she began cutting into the hen, a strange glint of excitement lit up her face, one I wasn't used to seeing. She served it up, watching each of us intently as we took our first bites. I wasn't sure what I expected, but as I brought a piece to my mouth, I could tell right away this wasn't the usual Thanksgiving fare. The meat was tough, almost stringy, and didn't pull apart easily. A far cry from the tender turkey or even chicken I was used to. Mom kept glancing between my dad and me with a kind of eager glee, as though she were waiting for us to say something. It was unsettling, her eyes wide, as if she were waiting for us to uncover some hidden secret. When I finally asked, "What's got you so excited, Mom?" she just smiled, her expression softening. "Oh, it's just this cookbook you found from Grandpa's things. It's like having a part of him here with every meal I make." She spoke with a reverence I hadn't heard in her voice for a long time, as though she were talking about more than just food. I gave her a nod, trying to humor her. "Tastes good," I said, hoping she'd ease up. I enjoyed it, but in truth, I wished we'd had a more familiar Thanksgiving dinner. The meal wasn't exactly bad, but something tasted a little off. I couldn't put my finger on it, and maybe I didn't want to. After we finished, I said my goodbyes and headed home, trying to shake the lingering sense of unease. My mom's face, her excitement, kept replaying in my mind. And then there was the hen itself. Why a hen? Why the pale, ashen sauce? There was something almost ritualistic in the way she'd prepared it, a strange precision I'd never seen from her before. The night stretched on, the questions gnawing at me, taking root in a way that wouldn't let me rest. When I got home, I couldn't shake the weird feeling from dinner. I sat down at my desk, opening the scanned file I'd saved to my desktop months ago. The folder had been sitting there, untouched, and now that I finally had it open, I could see why I'd put it off. The handwriting was dense and intricate, almost a kind of calligraphy, each letter curling into the next. The words seemed to dance across the pages in a strange, whimsical flow. I had to squint, leaning closer to make sense of each line. As I scrolled through the recipes, a chill ran down my spine. They had unsettling names, the kind that felt more like old spells than recipes. Mother's Last Supper porridge, binding broth of bone and leaf, Elder's ember bread, hollow heart soup with morning onion. I wasn't sure if it was my imagination, but I could almost feel a heaviness creeping into the room, the words themselves holding an eerie energy. Then I found it, the recipe for the dish my mother had made tonight, Ancestors' Offering. The recipe was titled in that same swirling calligraphy, and I felt a knot tighten in my stomach as I read the description. It was for a maple braised hen with black walnut and root puree, though it didn't sound like any recipe I'd ever seen. The instructions were worded strangely, written in a style that made it feel centuries old. Each ingredient was listed with specific purpose and detail, as though it held some secret power. My eyes skimmed down to the meat. It specified a hen, not just any chicken. The body must be that of a mother, it read. I felt a shiver go through me, remembering the strange way my mom had insisted on using a hen, correcting me when I'd casually referred to it as chicken. The instructions continued, noting that the hen had to be served on a bed of lamb's lettuce, a type of honeysuckle, according to a quick Google search. And then, as I read further, a chill seeped into my bones. The recipe stated it must be served just before the end of twilight, as dusk yields to night. I thought back to dinner, and the way we'd all sat down just as the last of the sun's light faded beyond the horizon. But the final instruction was the worst part, and as I read it, my stomach twisted in revulsion. The recipe called for something it referred to as ancestors' salt. The note at the bottom explained that this salt was a sprinkle of the ashes of those who have returned to the earth, with a warning to use it sparingly, as each grain remembers the one who offered it. I sat back, cold sweat breaking out across my skin as I recalled the pale, ashen sauce coating the hen, the faint, sweet scent it gave off. My mind raced, piecing together what it implied. Had my mom actually used ashes in the meal? Had she used my grandfather's ashes? I tried to shake it off, to tell myself it was just some old folklore nonsense. But the image of her smiling face as she served us that meal, the gleam in her eyes, crept back into my mind. I felt my stomach churn, bile rising in my throat as the horrifying thought sank deeper. A few days later, the gnawing unease had become impossible to ignore. I told myself I was probably just overreacting, that the weird details in the recipe were nothing more than some strange family tradition I didn't understand. Still, I couldn't shake the dread that crept up every time I remembered that meal. So, I decided to call my mom. I planned it out, careful to come off as casual. The last thing I wanted was for her to think I was accusing her of something as insane as putting ashes in our food. I asked about my dad, about her gardening, anything to warm her up a bit. Then I thanked her for the Thanksgiving dinner, even going so far as to say it was the best we'd had in years. When I finally brought up the recipe book, her voice brightened instantly. "Oh, thank you again for finding it," she said, sounding genuinely pleased. I had no idea he'd catalogued so many wonderful recipes. I knew your grandfather's cooking was special, but to have all these dishes recorded, like his own little legacy, it's been such a joy. I chuckled, trying to keep my tone light. I actually looked up that dish you made us, Ancestors' Offering. Thought maybe I'd give it a try myself sometime. "Oh, really?" she replied, sounding intrigued. "Yeah." Though I thought it was a little strange the recipe specifically calls for a hen and not just a regular chicken, since there's so much tougher. And the part that says it should be the body of a mother. I let the words hang, hoping she'd jump in with some explanation that would make it all seem less sinister. For a moment, there was just silence on her end. Then, quietly, she said, "Well, that's just how your grandfather wrote it, I suppose." Her voice was different now, lower, as if she were carefully choosing her word. My heart thumped in my chest, and I decided to press a little further. "I also noticed it calls for something called ancestor's salt," I said, feigning confusion, pretending I hadn't read the footnote that explicitly described it. "What's that supposed to be?" The silence was even longer this time, stretching out until it became a ringing hum in my ears. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely a whisper. I have to go," she murmured, sounding almost dazed. Before I could respond, the line clicked, leaving me in the heavy, stunned quiet. I tried calling her back immediately, but it went straight to voicemail. Her phone was off. My stomach twisted as I stared at the blank screen. I couldn't tell if I was more scared of what I might find out or of what I might already know. I hesitated, but eventually called my dad's phone, feeling a need to at least check in. When he picked up, I told him about my call with Mom and how strange she had been acting. "She went into her garden right after you two spoke," he said, sounding unconcerned. "Started tending to her plants, hasn't said a word since." I tried nudging him a bit, asking if he could maybe get her to talk to me, but he just brushed it off. "You're overreacting. You know how your mother is, gets all sentimental over family things. It'll just upset her if you keep nagging her about it. Give her some space." I nodded, trying to take his advice to heart. "Yeah, all right. You're probably right." After we hung up, I resolved to let it go and went about my day, chalking it up to my mom's usual habit of getting overly attached to anything with sentimental value. She'd always treated family heirlooms like they carried something sacred, almost magical. But this time, I couldn't fully shake the nagging feeling in the back of my mind, something that made it impossible to forget about that recipe book. Eventually, curiosity got the better of me. Sitting back down at my computer, I opened the digital copy and scrolled aimlessly through the pages. Part of me knew it was a bad idea, but I couldn't resist. I let the file skip down to a random section, thinking I'd try making something small, something harmless. As I scrolled, I found myself staring at the very last page, which held a recipe titled Elder's Ember Bread. The instructions were minimal, yet each word seemed heavy, steeped in purpose. Beneath the title, a note read, "Best served in small portions on cold, dark nights. The taste is best enjoyed alone, lest the voices of the past linger too long." I shook my head, half amused, half unnerved. It was all nonsense, I told myself. Probably just some old superstitions my grandfather had picked up along the way. But something about it had my heart pounding just a bit harder. Ignoring the rising chill, I printed the recipe and took it to the kitchen. I'd play along, I figured. It was just bread, after all. I scanned the list of ingredients for Elder's Ember Bread, feeling time slip away as though I'd been pulled into some strange trance. My mind blurred over, details of the process fading into a fog, yet I couldn't stop moving. I gathered everything without really thinking about it, each step drawing me deeper, as though I were following some ancient, well-worn path. I remembered flashes, the sweet scent of elderberry and honey, the earthy weight of raw rye, the dry, pungent aroma of wood burnt to charcoal. At some point I murmured something under my breath, words of thanks to my ancestors that I hadn't consciously decided to speak. The smell of warmed goat's milk lingered in the air, blending with a creamy, thick butter that had blackened over low heat. A faint scent of yew ash drifted up as I worked, curling into my nose like smoke from an unseen fire. By the time I came to my senses, night had fallen, the kitchen shadowed and still, and there, sitting on the counter, was the bread, a dark, dense loaf, blackened at the crust, but glistening with an almost unnatural sheen. It looked rich and moist, and as I stared at it, a strange sense of pride swelled up within me. Unnatural and unsettling, like a voice in the back of my mind was urging me to feel pleased, insisting that I'd done well. Without really thinking, I cut myself a slice and carried it to the living room, feeling compelled to enjoy my creation. I took a bite, and the bread filled my mouth with an earthy, bittersweet taste, smoky yet tinged with a subtle berry sweetness. It was unusual, nothing like I'd ever tasted before, but it was oddly satisfying. As I chewed, a warmth bloomed deep in my chest, spreading through me like the steady heat of a wood stove. It was comforting, almost intimate, as if the bread itself were warming me from the inside out. Before I knew it, I'd finished the entire slice, not because I'd particularly enjoyed it, but because some strange sense of obligation had pushed me to finish every bite. When I set the plate down, the warmth remained. A heavy presence settled deep inside me, and in the silence that followed, I could have sworn I felt a faint rhythmic beat, a heartbeat, steady and ancient, pulsing faintly beneath my skin. Over the next few weeks, I found myself drawn back to the elder's ember bread more often than I intended. I'd notice myself in the kitchen, knife in hand, halfway through slicing a thick piece from the loaf before even realizing I'd gotten up to do it. It was instinctive, almost as if some quiet impulse guided me back to it on those quiet late nights. Each time I took a bite, that same deep warmth would swell inside me, radiating outward like embers glowing from a steady fire. But unlike the hymn my mother had made, a meal that left me with a lingering sense of discomfort, the ember bread felt different. It was as though each bite carried something I couldn't quite place, something familiar and almost affectionate, like a labor of love embedded into every grain. The days blended together, but the questions didn't go away. I tried to reach out to my mother several times, hoping she might open up about the recipe book, maybe explain why we both seemed so drawn to these strange meals. But each time I brought it up, she'd evade the question, either changing the subject or claiming she was too busy to talk. She hadn't invited me over for dinner since Thanksgiving, and the distance between us felt like a slow, whining gulf. Even my dad, when I'd ask about her, shrugged it off, saying she was just going through a phase. But the coldness in her responses, her repeated avoidance of the book, only made me more certain that there was something she wasn't telling me. Still, I kept returning to the ember bread, feeling its subtle pull each time the sun set, as though I were being guided by something unseen. And each time I took a bite, it felt less like a meal and more like communion, a quiet bond that was growing stronger with every piece I consumed. After weeks of unanswered questions, I decided to reach out to my uncle at the prison. I was allowed to leave a message, so I kept it short, told him it was his nephew, wished him well, and let him know I'd left him $100 in commissary. The next day he called me back, his voice scratchy over the line but appreciative. "Hey, thanks for the cash," he said with a short chuckle. "You know how it is in here. Money makes things easier." We chatted for a bit, catching up. He'd been in and out of prison so often that I'd come to see it as his way of life. In his 60s now, he talked about his time behind bars with a kind of acceptance, almost relief. "By the time I'm out again, I'll be an old man," he said, almost amused. "It's not the worst place to grow old." Then I took a breath and brought up the reason I'd called. "I don't know if you remember, but when I was packing up your place, I found this old recipe book." I hesitated, then quickly added, I gave it to Mom. Thought she'd get a kick out of it." His response was immediate. The warm, casual tone in his voice shifted, growing cold and sharp. "Listen to me," he said, each word weighted and deliberate. "If you have that book, you need to throw it into a fire." "What?" I stammered, caught off guard. "It's just a cookbook." "It's not just a cookbook," he replied, his voice low, almost trembling. "That book, it brings out terrible things in people." He paused as though considering how much to say. "My father, your grandfather, he was into some dark stuff. Stuff you don't just find in the back of an old family recipe. And that book," he took a breath, "that book wasn't his. It belonged to his mother, your great-grandmother, passed down to him before he even knew what it was. My mother used to say those recipes were meant for desperate times." The gravity of his words settled into me, and I felt the weight of it all suddenly make sense. "They were used to survive hard times," he continued, voice quiet. "You've heard about what people did during the Great Depression, how desperate families were. But this," he exhaled sharply, "those recipes are ancient, passed down through whispers and word of mouth long before they were ever written down. But they're not for everyday meals. They're for invoking things, bringing things out, the kind of things that can take hold of you if you're not careful." My hand tightened around the phone as a cold shiver traced down my spine, my mind flashing back to the ember bread, the warmth it had left in my chest, the strange satisfaction that hadn't felt entirely my own. "Promise me," he continued, his voice almost pleading, "don't let Mom or anyone else use that book for anything casual. Those recipes can keep a person alive in hard times, sure, but they weren't meant to be used. Not unless you're ready to live with the consequences." A chill settled over me as I realized just how deep this all went. I hesitated, then told my uncle the truth. I'd already made one of the recipes. I described Elder's ember bread to him, the earthy sweetness, the warmth it filled me with, leaving out the part about how I'd almost felt compelled to eat it. He let out a harsh sigh and scolded me, his voice sharper than I'd ever heard. "You shouldn't have touched that bread. None of it. Do you understand me?" I felt a pang of guilt. "I know. I'm sorry. I promise. I won't make anything else from the book." "Good," he said, his voice calming a little. "But that's not enough. You have to get that book away from my sister, your mother, before she does something she can't take back." I tried to assure him I'd do what I could, but he cut me off, his tone deadly serious. "You need to do this. Something bad will happen if you don't." Over the next few weeks, as Christmas approached, I stayed in touch with him, paying the collect call fees to keep our conversations going. Every time we talked, the discussion would circle back to the book. I'd tell him about my progress, or lack of it, how I'd tried visiting my mom, only for her to brush me off with excuses, saying she was too busy, or that it wasn't a good time. And each time I talked to her, she seemed to grow colder, more distant, as if that recipe book was slowly casting a shadow over her. One day, I decided to drop by without any notice at all. When I showed up on her doorstep, she didn't seem pleased to see me. "You should have called first," she said with a forced smile. "It's rude, you know, just showing up like this." Her tone was tight, her words clipped. I tried to play it off, shrugging and saying I'd just missed her and wanted to check in. But as I scanned the house, I felt a creeping sense of unease. I looked for any sign of the book, hoping I could find it and take it with me, but it was nowhere to be seen. Each time, I'd leave empty-handed, feeling like I was being watched from the shadows as I walked out the door. Every call with my uncle became more urgent, his insistence that I retrieve the book growing into a kind of desperation. "You have to try harder," he'd say, his voice strained. "If you don't get that book away from her, something's going to happen. You have to believe me." And deep down, I did believe him. The memory of the ember bread, the strange warmth, and the subtle pull of that old recipe gnawed at me, as though warning me of something far worse waiting in that book. But it was more than that. Something in my mom's voice, her distant gaze, even her scolding felt off. And every time I left her house, I felt a chill settle over me, like I was getting closer to something I wasn't prepared to see. Christmas Day finally arrived, and despite my mother's recent evasions, there was no avoiding me this time. I gathered up the presents I'd bought for them, packed them into my car, and drove to their house, hoping the tension that had grown between us would somehow ease in the warmth of the holiday. When I knocked, she opened the door and offered a quick, half-hearted hug. The scent of baked ham and sweet glaze wafted out, thick and rich, and for a second I thought maybe she'd set aside that strange recipe book and return to her usual cooking. I relaxed a little, hoping the day would be less tense than I'd feared. "Where's Dad?" I asked, glancing around for any sign of him. "Oh, he's in the garage," she said, waving it off. "Got a new gadget he's fussing over, you know him." She gestured toward the dining room, where plates and holiday decorations were already set up. "Why don't you sit down? Lunch is almost ready." I took off my coat, glancing back at her. She was already turned away, busying herself with the last touches on the table, and I couldn't help but feel a pang of discomfort. Her movements were stiff, almost mechanical, and I could sense the familiar warmth in her was missing. It was like she was there, but somehow absent. Not wanting to disobey my mother on Christmas, I placed my gifts with the others under the tree and took my seat at the dining table. The plate in front of me was polished and waiting, a silver fork and knife perfectly aligned on either side, but the emptiness of it left an unsettling pit in my stomach. "Should I go get Dad?" I called out, glancing back toward the hallway that led to the garage. He'd usually be the first to greet me, especially on a holiday. The silence from him was off-putting. "He'll come when he's ready," my mother replied, her voice carrying from the kitchen. "He had a big breakfast, so he can join us later. Let's go ahead and start." Something about her response didn't sit right. It wasn't like my dad to skip a Christmas meal, not for any reason. A small, insistent thought tugged at me. Maybe it was the book again, casting shadows over everything in my mind, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. "I'll just go say hello to him," I said, rising from the table. Before I'd even taken a step, she entered the dining room, carrying a large ham on an ornate silver platter. The meat was dark and glossy, almost blackened, the glaze thick and rich, coating every crisscrossed cut she'd made in the skin. The bone jutted out starkly from the center, pale against the charred flesh. "Sit down," she said, her voice oddly stern, a hint of irritation slipping through her usual holiday warmth. "This is a special meal. We should enjoy it together." I stopped, glancing from her to the closed door of the garage, the words "special meal" repeating in my head, setting off warning bells. Still, I stood my ground, my stomach churning. "I just want to see Dad. That's all. I haven't even said hello." Her face tensed, her grip tightening around the platter as her voice rose. "Sit down and enjoy lunch with me." The words hung in the air, heavy and unyielding, like a command I was supposed to follow without question. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something terrible was lying just beneath the surface of her insistence. "No," I snapped, my voice echoing through the dining room. "I've had enough of this, Mom. You've been obsessed with that damn recipe book and I'm done with it." My heart pounded as I looked at her, my words hanging thick in the silence. But I didn't back down. "I'm going to the garage to get Dad. We're putting an end to this right now." Her face contorted, desperation spilling from her eyes. "Please, just sit down," she pleaded, her voice cracking as she looked at the untouched plate in front of me. "Let's have this meal together. It's important." I took a step toward the garage, determined to get my dad out here, to make him see how far she'd gone. That book had wormed its way too deep into her mind. She shrieked and threw herself in front of the door, arms outstretched as if to block my path. Her face was flushed, her voice frantic. "Don't go in there. Please just sit down. Enjoy the meal, savor it," she begged, her hands trembling as she reached out, practically pleading. There was a desperation in her voice that sounded like fear, not just of me, but of what lay beyond that door. "Mom, you're acting crazy. We need to talk, and I need to see Dad." I tried to push past her, but she held her ground, her body a thin, shaky barrier. "Please," she whispered, voice thin and desperate. "You don't understand. Don't disturb him. Dad," I called out, raising my voice over her pleas. Silence answered at first, followed by a muffled sound, a low, guttural moan, thick and unnatural, rising from the other side of the door. I froze, my blood turning cold as the sound slipped into a horrible, wet gurgle. My mother's face went white, her eyes wide with terror as she realized I'd heard him. I felt a surge of adrenaline take over, and before she could react, I shoved her aside and yanked open the door. The sight that met me would be seared into my memory forever. I stepped into the garage and froze, my stomach lurching at the scene before me. My dad lay sprawled across his workbench, his face pale and slick with sweat. His right leg was tied tightly with a belt just above the thigh, a makeshift tourniquet attempting to staunch the flow of blood. A pillowcase was wrapped around the raw, exposed flesh where his leg had been crudely severed, and blood pooled on the concrete floor beneath him, glistening in the cold fluorescent light. He lifted his head weakly, his eyes glassy and unfocused. His mouth moved, trying to form words, a barely audible rasp escaping as he struggled to speak. "Help me." I didn't waste a second. I pulled out my phone and dialed 911, my fingers shaking so badly it was hard to hit the right buttons. My mother's shrill screams erupted from behind me as she lunged into the garage, her hands clawing at the air, pleading. "Stop, please. Just sit down, just have lunch with me," she wailed, her voice high-pitched and frantic. Her face was twisted in desperation, tears streaming down her cheeks. But I didn't listen. I couldn't. I backed up, keeping a wide berth between her and my dad, and relayed the horror I was seeing to the dispatcher.
"It's my dad. He's lost his leg. He's barely conscious," I stammered, voice cracking. "Please, you need to hurry."
The dispatcher assured me that help was on the way, asking me to stay on the line. But my mother's desperate cries filled the garage, creating a haunting echo. She clutched at her head, her fingers digging into her scalp as she repeated, "Please, just come back to the table. Just eat. You have to eat." I kept my distance, heart pounding, as I watched her spiral into a frantic haze. But she never laid a finger on me. She only circled back to the door, wailing and begging in a chilling frenzy that made my blood run cold. The police arrived within minutes, their lights flashing against the house, and rushed into the garage to assess the situation. My mother resisted, screaming and flailing as they restrained her, her pleas becoming incoherent sobs as they led her away. I could barely breathe as I watched them take her, her voice a haunting wail that echoed down the driveway, begging me to come back and join her at the table. Paramedics rushed in and began working on my dad, quickly stabilizing him and loading him onto a stretcher. I followed them outside, numb with shock, barely able to process the scene that had unfolded. In the frigid December air, my mind reeled, looping over her chilling words and the horrible sight in that garage. At Christmas, the warmth of family and familiarity had turned into something I could barely comprehend, twisted into a nightmare I would never forget. I stayed by my father's side every day at the hospital, watching over him as he slowly regained strength. On good days when the painkillers were working and his mind was clearer, he told me everything he could remember about the last month with my mother. She'd been making strange, elaborate meals every single night since Thanksgiving, insisting he try each one. At first he thought it was just a new holiday tradition, a way to honor Grandpa's recipes, but as the dishes grew more unusual, more disturbing, he realized something was deeply wrong. She had started mumbling to herself while she cooked, almost like she was speaking to someone who wasn't there. Eventually he'd stopped eating at the house altogether, sneaking out for meals at nearby diners, ending any excuse he could to avoid her food. He even admitted that on Christmas morning when he tried to leave, she had drugged his coffee. Everything went hazy after that, and the next thing he remembered was waking up to pain and the horror of what she'd done to his leg. We discussed the recipe book in hushed tones, both coming to the same terrible conclusion. The book had changed her. My father was hesitant to believe anything so sinister at first, but the memories of her frantic insistence, the look in her eyes, made him certain, somehow, in some dark, twisted way, the book had drawn her into its thrall. By New Year's Eve, he was discharged from the hospital. I promised him I'd stay with him as he recovered, my own guilt over the role I'd unwittingly played gnawing at me. He accepted, his eyes carrying the quiet pain of someone forever altered. My mother, meanwhile, was undergoing evaluation in a psychiatric hospital. Since that Christmas, I hadn't seen her. I'd gotten updates from the doctors. They said she was calm, coherent, but that her words remained disturbing. She admitted to doing what she did to my father, repeating over and over, "We need to do what we must to survive the darkest days of the year." Her voice would drop to a whisper, a distant look in her eyes as though the phrase were a sacred mantra. On New Year's Eve, as the minutes ticked toward midnight, my father and I went out to his backyard fire pit. I carried the recipe book, feeling its familiar weight in my hands one last time. Without a word, I tossed it into the fire, watching as the flames curled around the old leather, devouring the yellowed pages. It crackled and twisted in the heat, the recipes that had plagued us dissolving into ash. My father's hand on my shoulder was the only anchor I had as the smoke rose, dissipating into the cold night air. But as the last ember faded, I felt a pang of something like regret. Later, as I sat alone, staring at my computer, I hovered over the file on my desktop. The digital copy, each recipe scanned and preserved in perfect, chilling detail. I knew I should delete it, erase any trace of the book that had shattered my family. And yet, I couldn't bring myself to do it. I fear that it may have a hold on me. My wife bought a reborn doll to cope with the death of our child. My child died after only a month on this earth. I'm going to spare myself the tears on explaining how, but the tears of my wife are ones I'll never forget. Grief is ugly. It's so fucking ugly. When we lost him, it sounded as if my wife was regurgitating fragments of her soul. Her wails could have shattered glass, curdled blood. The cries would turn to screams. Screams at the universe, at whichever sick, twisted higher power would let this happen. At herself, at me. She'd scream until the skin of her throat shredded to ribbons. I'll be honest, I didn't cry. I don't remember if I even shed a tear. But not because I wasn't upset. I didn't cry because it felt like she was already doing it for me. No pain is more shared than a grieving mother's cry. I wished there was a handbook on grief, a for dummies if you will. One that could have especially prepared me for the before and the after. Before, you're just waiting, like you're watching an hourglass of life on its last grain. My heart is pumping while he flatlines, and it hits like a wave. I'm going to have to grieve, I thought to myself. Before I could even experience it, I thought about how it was coming right for me. And I knew that in the blink of an eye, life was going to be something that I'd have to fight for. Maybe I was already grieving him before he went. Maybe I was prepared, or I just thought I was. I don't think you ever could be prepared. Then you reach the after. Not the moment you leave the hospital room, or even the drive home, It's the moment you open that front door, the air sucked out of the room, and you feel that thorough fucking void, that void in your chest, in your relationship, in your home. This is it. This is my life now. This is real. What hurt even more was that this new life wasn't so foreign to me. It was one I had Nyla a month ago. I felt so guilty for not grieving him, but instead grieving for what he could have been. I grieved for the first birthday and dozens after it, the first steps, the graduations. I'd even trade a hormonal teen fight with him over this. I couldn't help but grieve the life he could have had instead of the one we lost. My wife felt differently. She missed her skin touching, humming to him, even dragging herself out of bed at 3 a.m. because he was crying again. We never really discussed it, but we could just tell that we were grieving down two separate paths. Our backs were always turned in bed. She'd flinch when I'd touch her. It was as if she was allergic to me, but I understood she needed her space. The funeral was absolute hell on earth. Actually, I think rotting in the fiery pits of hell would feel better than attending an infant's funeral. At least it'd be warm, unlike the icy grip of mourning. I remember walking up to the casket alone, staring down at him, and all I could think was, caskets shouldn't be that small. He laid in a box that was small enough to cradle in my arms. When they lowered him into the ground, the cries emerged again. My wife wailed into the clear morning sky. So guttural it was, as if it was happening all over again. But she didn't collapse into my arms. She collapsed to the ground, as if she wanted to join him. Then you open the front door again, and the voids are even deeper. Everything is even realer. We packed up our child's nursery and his future into boxes, then fought about whether or not to throw it all out. She said she wanted them in the attic. I said I'd never be able to go up there again if we did. So we just left it all in that room, collecting dust. The door stayed shut at all times, but never locked, just closed. I think it symbolized our grief, in a way. We closed the door on that part of our lives, but weren't ready to lock it away forever. Each day doesn't get easier. It just gets farther away from the day it happened. The mornings are the worst. You wake up, your eyes creak open. The morning sun is pouring through your window, and then you remember that you're grieving as if you could forget. Little things began to tick us off. One of us would forget to do the dishes, and it'd end up with someone sleeping on the couch or taking a long midnight drive. We tried couples therapy, but we needed so much more therapy than that. It wasn't even about us. It was about him. The wedge was him. I was at my wit's end with how to deal with this. But it appeared that my wife was one step ahead of me when I heard a soft humming from our bedroom after I came home from work. My brows furrowed as I made my way upstairs. The last time I heard her hum this tune was at the hospital, right before the heart rate monitor hummed back. When I pushed the cracked open door, I felt like I was dreaming. She was laying in our bed, cradling a baby in her arms, looking down at it like she could see every planet, every star, every galaxy. I remember pinching my thigh as I stared at her, the slight pain stinging. She was so engrossed by it, I could have stood there till the end of time and she wouldn't have noticed. Honey. She finally looked up. Oh, hi. She stretched a smile that had become so foreign. Oh, what are you holding?
Doll? This?
It's a Reborn doll. I raised a brow at her. They're realistic dolls for mothers to help me cope. She nodded rapidly, her smile weakening. It was as if I had disrupted the fantasy just by asking. Oh, I couldn't help but stare at it. And stare at her because of the way she'd stare at it, as if she was holding her own flesh and blood, and not plastic. Has it helped? I've only had it for a few hours now. But it's comforting. It rubbed me the wrong way at first. But if nothing else was working, I was glad if this would. Do you want to hold him? Suddenly, I felt myself at a crossroads. I didn't know if I could hold a doll and give her the reaction she wanted. I can't look at it like it's my son. But I knew that this wasn't just about me. So I hesitantly walked over and stretched my arms out. A slight chill ran down my spine as its cold skin was placed onto my palms. I pulled it close and cradled it, staring down at it. And suddenly, I crumbled into tears. It felt too fucking real. I dropped to my knees as it laid in my shaking arms, my scrunched face already wet. I knew it wasn't actually my son, but I realized how much I missed this. Not just the moments we lost. My wife patiently waited as I wailed with my head hung. I let out cries I never knew I could, my voice cracking with each ugly sob. After that day, I noticed things getting better. It didn't fill the voids, but something else stood inside of them for a while, just to keep them dormant. Whenever she had one of those days where standing on her own 2 feet didn't feel worth it, she'd hold it, hum to it. Sometimes she'd pretend to breastfeed it. I will admit it still creeped me out to some extent. It was comforting in a way, but I knew it wasn't him, and I think this is when the wedge grew deeper. One day I came home, and as I walked upstairs, my entire body locked as I saw light leaking out of the door. That door, I knew it was unlocked, but I never expected either of us to ever open it. At least, not so soon. I swallowed roughly as I approached it. Slowly opening the door revealed empty boxes and a full nursery. She had set up everything again. I observed the room as I stepped in, a feeling of concern weighing on me. Then, I noticed something in the crib. I wrapped my fingers around the railing and leaned in, my brows furrowing as I saw the doll lay. I didn't hear you come in. My body jolted as I whipped around. Jesus. Sorry, you. What is this? What is this? Our nursery? Well, yeah. But why is everything unboxed? Our baby needs a nursery. We stared at each other with accusations of insanity. Look, I've researched these dolls, and I understand how this helps you. I'll admit, it's helped me a bit too. But this, this isn't our what? Suddenly I was tongue-tied and just concerned. I unpacked all of this myself. I'll put it all back when I want to. Okay? She said slowly and sternly, daggers shooting from her eyes. I could feel a million words crawling up my throat, but the only thing that came out was, okay, I think I need some alone time with him. I nodded, looking away as I slipped past her. I was trying to be patient with her. I really was, but I just couldn't meet her at the lengths she was going. Pretending this is our kid may help her, but it only made me feel worse. That night, not a word was exchanged under those sheets. I was turned towards the window, and she was turned towards the baby monitor that she put new batteries in. After making faces out of the moon, I eventually fell asleep. Suddenly, in the middle of the night, I felt myself drift away from my dream and wake up. My eyes slowly creaked open, the dim moonlight coming through the window. The room was silent, except for the cries that came through the baby monitor. I sat up and rubbed my eyes, staring at the monitor as staticky cries emitted from the speaker. Liv, Tubio, wake up. I shook my wife till she groaned out of her slumber. She lifted her sleeping mask and looked at the monitor. My eyes darted towards her, then back at the monitor. She sighed, tossed her mask onto the dresser and stood up. I'll handle him. Get some sleep. I stared at her wide-eyed, my throat knotted, as she tiredly walked out of the room. As she stepped into the nursery, I began to hear her over the speaker. Shh, 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 shh. It's okay. I blinked like a deer in headlights as I listened to her hum, the crying slowing to a stop. My eyes shifted towards the door as she walked back in, grabbed her sleeping mask and laid back down. She didn't say a word as I just continued to stare. A part of me wanted to go into the nursery, but I just laid there till my eyes dried and ran bloodshot. Before I knew it, the sun was up and I had to go to work. I slowly stood up and stiffly got ready. I tried to convince myself that it was a dream, but I had already woken up from what? When I finished getting dressed, I kissed her as she slept and left the room. As I passed the nursery, I paused for a moment. At first I considered going in, but instead I pressed my ear against the door. But there was nothing, just absolute silence. I don't know what I thought I was going to hear. I didn't even know what I heard last night. I couldn't tell if hearing something now would have made me feel more or less insane. That day at work was grueling. I kept falling asleep at my desk, had a hard time processing what people were even saying to me. It was just one big blur. When I got home, the first thing I wanted to ask my wife was what the fuck happened last night. But after the incident in the nursery, I feared she'd tell me that the doll crying is normal because it's our son. When I got home, I was ready to fall flat on my face. My wife stood at the sink washing dishes, her head turning as I walked in. Hey hun. Hi. How was work? The usual. Be quiet when you go upstairs. I just put him down and it wasn't without a fight, she chuckled. You'll be sure not to wake him. I anxiously cleared my throat as she quickly glared at me, then looked away. At least I was trying to play along. I quietly walked upstairs, minimizing the creaks of each step. As I passed the door, I could feel my breathing and heartbeat halt to a stop. Something about it just always knocked the wind out of me. Dinner was so silent you could hear a pin falling before it even dropped. Chewing and sipping filled the dense quiet. I was thinking of taking him to a mommy and me class. I looked up. My chewing slowed. Is that? Sounds good. I bit my tongue and smiled. I couldn't tell if she was being serious or if she just wanted to talk. I also wish you'd spend more time with him. You avoid the nursery like the plague. She laughed weakly. I'll make sure to do that. Thank you. Watching her eat, the look on her face, I could tell she could barely get the food down her throat. She was trying, she was really fucking trying. I felt guilty for not being more understanding. It was hard to accept that we were just going to be grieving in different ways, no matter what, but I was at a crossroads when it felt like our grief couldn't help each other. But the one thing that was itching at the back of my mind was last night. It was crying. How could it be crying? It didn't seem to surprise her, either. I tried to make any logical reasoning for it. Maybe she set an alarm with a baby crying sound, or if there's a speaker inside of it, something to make it feel realer. It was possible, except for one other thing. It sounded so much like him. If you're not a parent, a baby crying is just a baby crying, but I could pick out those cries from a crowd. Maybe it's just grief playing mind games. I couldn't tell. Later that night, after brushing my teeth, I was walking to our bedroom when I noticed my wife in the nursery. She was slowly rocking back and forth in the rocking chair, humming to it. "Hey, I finally got him to sleep," she said after noticing me hovering in the doorway. "That's good. Come say goodnight." I stared for a moment before forcing myself to enter the room. She stood up and walked over to the crib, then gently placed it down. She leaned down, kissed his forehead, then turned to me. I glanced at her, then at it. I could tell she was expecting me to do the same. I hesitantly leaned towards it, my lips puckered. Suddenly, as I got closer, a pungent smell entered my nostrils. I tried to ignore it, but I recoiled as I got closer, the foul stench growing stronger. My wife glared at me in horror as I gagged, clasping my hand to my mouth. "What the fuck is wrong with you?" "I am sorry."
Not it.
Okay? He smells like a fucking dumpster fire.
What? Does he have built-in fecal mechanics too?
Tears welled in her eyes as I looked away with guilt, my entire body shaking. "Just admit that this is a joke to you. You think I'm embarrassing myself, that I'm crazy. Just say it." No, actually don't. Just sleep somewhere else tonight. The couch, the fucking sidewalk, I don't care.
Okay.
I flew out of the room before I could burst into tears of fury. I felt like such a fucking monster. Prioritizing both of our healing was just tearing me apart. It was tearing us apart. I curled up on the couch and screamed into the pillow, leaving tear stains on the cover. I sobbed until it exhausted me, eventually knocking me out. All of a sudden, I was ripped from my slumber at the sound of glass shattering, my body jolting awake. I quickly sat up, my eyes darting around in a blur. Throwing the blanket off of me, I stood up and searched for the source of the sound. The room was pitch black as I ran my hand along the walls to find a light switch. Suddenly, my eyes shot open as something sharp impaled the bottom of my foot. "Fuck! Shit!" I hissed to myself as I lifted my foot. Now I was hopping around till I found a light switch, while also avoiding glass that I could not see. Eventually, I found one and illuminated the kitchen. I looked down at my foot, a small train of blood drops behind me. I lifted it up, blood leaking down my skin. It was a small shard of porcelain, so I pursed my lips, took a deep breath, bit my cheek and yanked it out. I swallowed a scream as I placed the crimson-coated shard on the kitchen counter. Then, I noticed some white powder on the bottom of my foot as well. I limped around the kitchen, soon finding a shattered cookie jar and an open flour bag spilled across the floor. God fucking damn it. I quickly tied an unused dish rag around my foot and began picking up the shards. The stress of the cut and the mess overshadowed the thought of how it even fell in the first place. But this thought came front and center when I noticed small flour-coated footprints leading out of the kitchen. I slowly placed the last shard in the trash as my eyes stared under furrowed brows. I limped over and kneeled down, observing them closely. They looked like, no, impossible. I told myself it was impossible. But who else could have feet that small? It wasn't my wife, and it wasn't an animal. An uneasiness clouded over me as I quickly vacuumed it up. The trail was longer than I realized as I exited the kitchen and made my way through the living room. Eventually, I reached the stairs, noticing the footprints went up them too. My eyes slowly glided up, then stared deeply into the dark hallway. I was able to at least try and logically explain the crying the other night, but I couldn't make anything of this. I took a deep breath and slowly made my way upstairs. With each footprint that vanished into the vacuum added one more beat to my pounding heart. When I reached the top step, I realized the trail led even farther. I continued to follow it, taking the curve it took that ended at a door. That door, I slowly stood up, my heavy shaking breaths hitting the wood, but I couldn't bring myself to go in. I just wanted to cry, feeling like I was being haunted by my own grief. I could have been standing there for a minute or an hour. Either way, it felt like forever before I finally stepped away and entered the bathroom. I held back tears as I made sure there wasn't any glass left in my foot, then properly bandaged it. With everything that had happened and was happening, all I could think was, why us? Why me? I just wanted to be a husband, a father, a family. Why does life's unfairness have to be so cruel? It's more than just not getting what you want. It's losing what you love. It's your son dying after only a month of being. It's not unfair. It's just cruel. So fucking cruel. After securing the bandage, I limped out of the bathroom, my body weighing with exhaustion. Then I halted in front of the nursery door, my eyes scrunching shut as the sound of crying suddenly came from behind it. Never in my life have I prayed, not even for my son. It felt like shouting into a void, but at that moment I prayed. I prayed for it to end. I needed it to end. But nobody was listening. Life wasn't that fair. I should have known that. I opened my eyes, tears welling in them, and kept walking past it. The cries grew fainter as there was a ceiling between us, but I could still hear them. I could feel them crying for Daddy as I laid my heavy head on the couch pillow. I had hoped that my wife would wake up and deal with it, but she never did. The entire night I laid there, the tears drying against my cheeks as it relentlessly cried. My psyche was shattering piece by piece as it grew impossible to even keep a grasp on reality or try and figure out what the fuck was going on while its screams filled my ears and bounced around in my skull. At that point, I just wanted to die, or to at least just be numb, to have the ability to not give a single fuck about anything happening, even if just for 5 seconds would have helped me sleep that night. By the time it was morning, the crying had stopped at some point, but I don't remember when. Jack, my wife suddenly said, her hand resting on my shoulder. I jolted, my head whipping towards her. Didn't mean to scare you. It's fine, I just didn't sleep. I could see guilt hanging on her expression. Is everything all right? I want to apologize for last night. You've been very patient with me, and I feel like I've been asking you for more than you can handle. We paused in silence for a moment, our eyes shifting around each other. I appreciate it. I'm sorry too. I've been too judgmental. We don't have to be on the same page to care about each other. She sat down next to me and rested her head on my shoulder. I kissed the top of her head and enjoyed the quiet with her. I wanted to bring up what I saw last night, but figured now wasn't the right time. And about the smell, you weren't wrong. I went to go see him this morning, and it hit me like a truck, she chuckled weakly. Turns out, he was molding on the inside, which can happen apparently. I reached out to the cellar and she said that it happens due to poor upkeep. Suddenly, she broke into tears, collapsing into my chest. I held her close as her tears soaked through my shirt. How did I manage to lose him twice? My heart shattered. It's okay. It's okay. You can always get a new one. No, I can't. I looked into her eyes with deep concern. Olivia, can we speak honestly for a moment? With no hard feelings? She slowly nodded. It's a doll. You can get a new one. Even then, I pushed the wrong buttons as she ripped herself from my arms and stormed upstairs. You don't get it. You never did.
You know what? No, that's not fucking fair.
None of this is fucking fair. Before I could get another word in, she was already in our bedroom, the door slamming behind her. I buried my face in my hands as I drew deep, slow breaths. Everyone always said grief brings people together, but all this is doing is tearing everything apart. My marriage, myself, my understanding of what's real and what isn't. I spent another workday in a complete daze. I even got reprimanded by my boss for lack of work ethic. When I got home, I was met with a distraught wife. She was definitely still mad at me, so I considered whether or not to even ask if she was okay.
Hey, hun. Are you alright?
I threw him out. Oh, I'm so sorry. Are you?
Leave.
Surprised you didn't say thank God. Look,
I'm sorry about this morning, but I'm trying. And I know you know that, but it's hard when you keep flying off the handle. Do you want to see somebody? A grief counselor?
he was my grief counselor. That's why I'm getting another one, just like you said.
Right?
Right. Whatever works for you. I smiled weakly. She sipped her coffee with a daze in her eye, like she could see something that wasn't there. Just by looking at her, you could tell she was dangling at the edge. But I couldn't pry and prod anymore, for her sake and mine. She let me sleep in our bed that night, but we didn't exchange any more words than good night. I could feel the back of her ankles against my legs. At some point she even turned towards me in her sleep, but she didn't want to touch me. She needed just enough space, and I let her have it. A night without it in the house gave me the best sleep I had gotten since he died. I woke feeling refreshed for once, but I quickly noticed the emptiness next to me. She must have gotten up early. As I left the bedroom, my brows furrowed as I heard humming from behind the nursery door. My puzzled expression twisted further as I saw my wife cradling it in her arms. Good morning. I thought you had to get rid of him. Good morning. And I did. This is the new one. She smiled.
Well, already?
So fast. Express shipping. She shrugged with a chuckle. Sweet. Then, I'm gonna try and put him down for his nap. Could you brew me a cup? Yeah, sure. I smiled before closing the door behind me. The second she couldn't see me anymore, I stood absolutely baffled. Something about it just seemed off. How could she have gotten a new one that quickly? It didn't add up. She had gotten so attached to it, the thought of her wanting to keep it, no matter the mold, didn't surprise me. What hurt the most is that she'd lie to me. After filling the steaming mugs, I set them down at the table and read the news on my phone as I waited for her to come down. He didn't put up a fight, thank God, she sighed with relief as she trotted downstairs. That's good. I sipped my coffee, keeping my eyes on the screen. She sat across from me, taking slow sips as she stared off in a daze again. I occasionally glanced up at her, watching her tap her finger against the mug and bite her cheek. Are you all right? She laughed at the question, circling her finger around the rim of the mug. Weather's nice today, she responded. It is. Maybe you should spend some time outside. You could take him out for a walk. Yeah, that sounds nice. Her words trailed off like she was dreaming. I helped her take out the baby carriage that we never got to use and watched with unease as she laid the doll in it. Hope you two have a nice time, I smiled. We'll be back soon. We quickly kissed before she was out the door. And finally, I could breathe. It was only a mere few hours, but it was still time to breathe. It was also time to think. The past few nights, I had experienced things that were beyond what I thought grief would be like. I knew it'd be haunting, but not like this. I never really believed in the supernatural. I'd say I'm a skeptical person, but after the constant crying, the footprints, I couldn't make any logic out of it. I'd run in circles to death before it made any actual sense, and my wife seems to know more than she's letting on, but I was scared that one more question would push her out the door. I couldn't lose her too. But now our grief wasn't just going down two different paths, it was going in completely opposite directions. She needed the doll to heal, and I needed it gone to heal, but I didn't know how to get rid of it without hurting her in the process. I thought about tossing it and making her believe she misplaced it, but that just felt cruel. I didn't need to put her under any more distress. By the time she got back, I hadn't really moved off of square one. I still understood nothing. I figured out nothing. I was just aching even more. Are you feeling better? Yeah, it was nice to get some sun. This little guy enjoyed it too. Didn't you? Didn't you? She gushed. I couldn't help but feel so uncomfortable watching her treat it like it was our son. But it's her way of coping and I had to respect that. To at least put myself at some ease. I told myself that I'm just under a lot of stress and that my grieving mind is just playing tricks on me. I guessed being tormented by him was better than never seeing him again. That night, she laid close to me. Our legs intertwined as she fell asleep against me, her arm across my chest. I missed her warmth so much. I thought his death had cooled her touch, but she was still so warm, so comforting. It was easy falling asleep that night with her against me, like a child and their favorite stuffed animal. But I was stupid to forget that life isn't unfair, it's cruel. In the middle of the night, I was awoken by the cries over the baby monitor again. Only this time, as my eyes opened, I realized I couldn't move anything else. My heart pounded as I drew in panic breaths. My jaw merely trembled as I attempted to speak. Pleas for help caught in my throat. A tear streamed down the side of my face as I waited for my wife to wake up. But she didn't. I was locked on that bed, unable to do nothing but listen to its cries. I wanted to scream, sob, punch a fucking wall, but I could do absolutely nothing. Suddenly the speaker cut out, its cries halting with a staticky screech. My trembling breaths filled the silent room as my body stayed frozen on the bed. I couldn't even squeeze out a groan to try and wake her. Then, the sound of a door creaking open came from the hallway, and the cries began again. Not over the speaker, but from the hallway. Its cries sounded distorted. They were deeper, more drawn out, and they sent goosebumps from head to toe. I scrunched my eyes as I begged to be able to move, the crying nearing closer. Then, the bedroom door slowly opened, the deep cries filling up the room. I looked over at my wife, who was somehow still asleep. I wondered if this was even happening outside of my own head. Couldn't see it, but I could tell it was moving closer, and with each step, its cries grew deeper. It reached the point that it sounded like it was gargling on its own blood. When it stood by my ear, its sobs were deafening. Now, I couldn't move, and I couldn't hear anything besides this suffocating, dizzying crying that made me feel like I was drowning in molten tar. Dada, it gurgled, and just like that, I felt my entire body unlock, and a scream worth 1,000 screams exited my mouth like a dam breaking open. The sound waves rippled my throat as I scatteredly threw myself off the bed and into the corner of the room. Jesus Christ, my wife shouted as she finally woke up, ripping off her sleeping mask and turning the lamp on. I let out wails of pure terror as I balled up in the corner, my body tremoring. My God, what happened? I could barely squeeze a word out in between sobs. Jesus. She hopped off the bed and kneeled next to me, my body flinching as she reached for me. What happened? I slowly turned to her, my eyes gaping wide. Instead of saying a word, I stumbled to my feet and made my way out of the bedroom. Where are you going? What happened? Jack. I ignored her calls as I threw the nursery door open. My eyes darted around as I searched for it, then realized it was in the crib. Jack, what are you doing? I'm not doing this anymore. Jack, can we talk about this? She gasped in horror as I yanked it out of the crib. You're right, Olivia. This isn't a doll. This is a fucking parasite, and I want it gone. Jack, please. That's our son. No, it's fucking not. She winced as I screamed. Stop, please, she begged, tears pouring down her face as I began rapidly shaking it in front of her face. This isn't our son. Then, in one final burst of rage, I gripped it by its throat and slammed it to the ground with all of my might. In this moment, I realized that I learned two things from the death of my son. Caskets aren't supposed to be that small, and reborn dolls aren't supposed to have internal organs. My wife crumbled to her knees as she let out those cries, the ones I could never forget. My breathing and heartbeat practically stopped, my body shutting down for a moment as I stared down at the spilled, graying organs and mushy skin that she attempted to cup in her trembling hands. I slowly looked up at her, utter horror hanging on my expression. Olivia, what is this? He didn't belong down there. He belongs with me, with us. Something inside me ate my mother. To my dearest Rosie, the day a girl gets her period is a memorable one. Usually not for happy reasons, but memorable nonetheless. I was 10 when I got mine, just a year younger than you are now. It was a sticky, disgusting August day, the kind where your neck is already slick by the time you get to the bus stop, which for me was already a trek. My family lived in the sticks, and no one ever had time to drive me to school, so I walked about 3 miles every morning to catch the bus. It was a Wednesday, and I asked my mom if I could stay home that day because my tummy hurt. She waved me off, said I was a lazy liar, blah blah blah. So I grumbled to that bus stop, grumbled onto the bus, and grumbled into social studies. Within the first hour of some activity we were doing, I felt something strange on my seat but ignored it. I must have been very into whatever we were doing because I thought, we'll just check at bathroom break, it's in 10 minutes anyway. That was until E.J. Taylor stood up to sharpen his pencil. This was unfortunate for 3 reasons. 1, the pencil sharpener was right behind my seat. 2, I was wearing my new white khaki shorts. And 3, unbeknownst to me, I had started my period. "Ivy's bleeding," E.J. shouted with his big stupid mouth. People gathered around and saw that he was right. I had a big giant red spot right on my butt. It doesn't feel good to have your 4th grade class see you get your first period, or to see the disgusted janitor come in and remove your little chair like it's a biological weapon, or to stand in the front office while they call your mom because they don't want you to sit on anything else. But it wasn't the worst thing to happen to me that day. My already pained gut twisted when I found out they were calling my mom. I just knew she'd be so mad at me. But in a way, I was thankful for that big red spot. It was proof I wasn't faking. Maybe she'd even be sorry. Mom came barreling in with a stone face, grabbed my wrist, ignored the secretary asking her to sign me out, and practically threw me in the back of the car. There was a towel across the back seat, so I at least didn't have to stress about getting her seats dirty. We made eye contact in the rearview mirror before she put the car in drive. She shook her head at me and said, "I can't believe you would do this to me." It was the only thing she said for the whole car ride. When we got home, she yanked me out of the car and into the house. My heart sank when I realized my dad's car was gone, at work, and my big brother would still be at school. I was all alone. She pulled me into my room and slammed the door. I kept my breath still as she stared down at me, her chest rising and falling like angry tectonic plates. I watched her, like cornered prey watches a predator, fear choking my throat, senses needle sharp, aware of any sound or move I might make that could her off, make her snap her jaw. My stomach still hurt, and I needed to pee. I wanted whatever this was to be over. "I'm sorry, Mom." I tried. "Is it moving yet?" she asked. "What?" I said, baffled. She didn't respond, just bent down to a knee and placed one hand on my stomach and pressed her ear up against my tiny tummy, the same way I've seen people do to pregnant women. I mistook this gesture for a hug and tried to wrap my small arms around her, but they were pushed away. Finally, she got back to her feet, cleaning her hands of me on her dress. My mother was as beautiful as she was wrathful. A stunning woman, long hair of bright copper that shined like fresh honey down her slender back in the sunlight. Her scent was one of warm greenery from spending so much time out in her garden, tending to the roses she cherished so much. Roses that overtook much of our backyard, like a crimson flood. I wasn't allowed near the flowers. She was always afraid I'd find some way to ruin them. "Maybe you don't have it. Maybe it's just small. You will stay until we see," she said, and turned and left. I heard her drag a chair from the kitchen and place it under my door handle. Still in my bloody khaki shorts and my Scooby-Doo backpack, I did 2 things I'm not proud of. I pissed myself and cried. Eventually I changed out of those shorts and pushed them away in a corner. I put on a different pair, aware that these would just get dirty too since I didn't know how to stop the bleeding. I tried calling out to my mom a couple of times, but she would either not respond or bang something heavy against the door. It didn't take me long to give up, exhausted from the crying and the bleeding, but also scared to stain my sheets. I curled up on the hardwood floor and fell asleep. When I woke up, it was to the sound of loud, angry voices, my mom and my dad. I was surprised as Dad never really yelled, so something must have really riled him up. I felt a sinking feeling again, thinking that he must be angry at me too for this period stuff. I really messed up. I thought, "Can't you go somewhere or put her somewhere else?" My dad was yelling. He sounded desperate. I heard what sounded like my mom spitting on the ground. "It will find me, consume me. It doesn't matter how far." "You don't think my mother ran?" "She ran, but it didn't matter. I won't let that happen to me. Alicia, she's just a little girl," my dad said, fully begging now. She spat again and called me a name in her native language. I didn't know what language that was. Your grandmother and I were not close. She wouldn't even tell me where she was from. I would find out later that the country she was technically from in Eastern Europe doesn't exist anymore. It hasn't for a long time. "You would like if I was gone, eh?" she asked angrily. My dad muttered something and shuffled away. That was his way of things mostly. "Go," she yelled, and I heard him head out to the backyard. I felt something move in my stomach. A cramp, I had thought at first, like the ones I had this morning, but this was different. It felt like the cramp was growing as it moved, expanding and twisting. If this morning there was a great bouncing around in my stomach, now it was an apple. It made me think back to what my mom had asked me when we first got home. Is it moving yet? What had that meant? I didn't know a thing about periods, but whatever this thing was moving inside of me felt abnormal. I heard stomping down the hall, the sound of the chair being moved, and then my mother opening the door. She carried a bundle of rope in her hands and an anchor-deep frown on her face. "Mommy?" I tried, but she ignored me. She bent down to listen for whatever it was writhing around inside of me. I knew then something was in fact in me, so I stepped away, desperate for her to not find it. Her eyes narrowed into daggers when I did this. She snatched me forward, digging her nails into my sides to keep me in place while she listened. The thing practically kicked as soon as she put her ear up to my stomach. She gasped and jolted back slightly. She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. I began crying too. "Mommy, what is it?" I gulped. She answered with a sharp, stinging slap of her skinny hand across my cheek. "You pretend like you don't know, but I know you do. Just like I know Carmilla did when she took my mother. You will not replace me, beast." She hissed and turned me around, binding my wrist behind my back tightly with the rope. Carmilla was my mom's little sister. At that point, I'd never met her. I just knew that none of the family spoke to her. She was beautiful, and some of the family blamed her for an accident that killed my mom's mom. I had no idea what she had to do with my first period or with the thing inside me. As my mom tightened the rope with one final tug, we both jumped at rushing footsteps down the hall. My big brother was home from school. "Ivy, you better not still have the DS." He had started, but paused in my doorway at the sight, speechless. His eyes darted from the sight of Mom binding my hands and the pile of blood-soaked clothes in the corner. She softened at the sight of him. Her hands that had just hogtied my tiny wrists together became feather-soft on his cheeks as she caressed him. Despite all the pain so far that day, the envy seemed to sting the worst. It was like she shape-shifted into a softer, edgeless form, one I never got to meet, only observe. "My sweet, gather your things. You and your father are going to your grandfather's for the night," she cooed. My brother's eyes moved from her to me, with intense confusion. "Is Ivy coming?" he asked after thinking for a moment. Her lip twitched, the delicate mask almost faltering before shaking her head. "No, she is going away to stay with Aunt Carmilla for some time," she told him. He glanced over at me again, and I shook my head subtly. He nodded and then said he'd go pack. She bent down and kissed him on his forehead, called him a good boy, and followed him out, replacing the chair under my doorknob as she did. Hours passed. The sun was setting now, and I heard feet moving around the house and the zippers of bags being packed. I managed to shuffle over to my window to look into the backyard. With the sun on the horizon, I saw my mother's thin silhouette, a solid, inky shadow against the raging fire she had begun in the fire pit. Except I realized it was much bigger than the fire pit. No, a large hole had been dug, and wood was piled inside of it, burning red and angry in the center of the yard. I felt the thing move again inside me, clawing around at my guts. Maybe grapefruit size now, I thought. I swallowed the groan that shuddered in my throat. Whatever this thing was, it was getting bigger by the hour. My insides felt like a blender blade had been placed and turned on inside my intestines. My organs like they were twisting through my ribcage like restless sleepers. My legs were red-stained and itchy from the sticky blood, fresh and old, that had not been tended to since I was picked up that morning from school. I heard the chair move from the door, this time more gently, and my brother came in. He stood awkwardly near the door for a second. "I asked Mom if I could say bye, 'cause you're going to Aunt Carmilla's," he said, looking at my face. He was asking if it was true. I realized. I shook my head, just in case she was listening. He nodded, like he already knew it was lie and this was just confirmation. "Well, you can take my DS with you. It smells like a bag of pennies in here," he said and walked around the room, feigning to look for the thing until he quietly unlatched my bedroom window and pushed it open just enough for me to be able to squeeze myself out. He then fiddled with something in his cargo short pocket. He mouthed, "Ask for a hug." "Can I have one last hug, Toby, before I go?" I sniffled. Honestly, I really did need a hug. "Ugh, fine." He moaned and embraced me, holding whatever it was from his pocket. I gasped slightly as I felt the tight ropes release from behind me. He had cut me free. "Pretend like you're still tied up." She made Dad dig a big hole. "I don't know what's going on, but you gotta go. She said she's waiting for it to come out of you." He looked at me now, searching for an answer. I glanced down at my belly, where the grapefruit was visibly darting around, looking like a bouncing ping-pong ball encased in my pink flesh.
I don't like that, Toby said simply.
Yeah, me either, I agreed. Well, I think you're safe while it's still inside you. I'm gonna hug her a bunch in the driveway. But before I do, I'll accidentally honk the car horn. While I do that, crawl out your window, into the woods, and just book it. Okay?
In scared, I cried softly into his shoulder.
I know, I am too. But just try, okay? I don't want you to go to Aunt Camilla's, he said shakily and gave me a real hug.
We'll try.
Is Dad gonna say goodbye? I asked. Toby shook his head. A slight fury sparked in his eyes. He said it's easier if he doesn't see you again. He left then, replacing the chair under my doorknob. I listened intently for the sound of the horn after the front door slammed shut. Finally, I heard the honk and tried to scramble as quick as I could out my small bedroom window. As I brought my stomach across the sill, the thing inside raged, apparently disliking the windowsill pressing against it. On just the other side of my skin, I felt what seemed to be hundreds of sharp little teeth trying to bite outward, but failing to break through the flesh, instead just shredding the walls of my abdomen, flaying my stomach lining. The pain, along with the image of my flesh falling into my stomach acid like shaved beef, brought forth two things: an ear-shattering screech and an explosion of vomit from my mouth. Through my ringing ears, I heard my dad's car tires screech away and the sound of someone sprinting my way. As I tried to push myself through, I heard my door fling open. My beautiful mother stood there, axe in hand. That was the motivation I needed. I managed to push through the window, but not before my mother got a swipe in on my left ankle, splitting it open like a gusher. The warm liquid burst out of my leg as if it were eager to leave. I screamed when I hit the grass below, my ankle now taking first place in the Agony Olympics. My body was hosting today. I didn't want to look at it, hoping it felt worse than it actually was. However, between the silver light of the full moon and the dancing red flames of that fire, I saw that it was a raw, mangled mess. One more chop might have taken the thing off completely. Making a beeline for the woods was out of the question now, so without any other choice, I crawled into the nearest of my mother's rose bushes, bearing the thorns that anointed me in sanguine slices, as I took refuge. In some way, I wish you could have seen the rose bushes, but I don't think they'd intended to since that night. Your grandmother was a talented gardener, really impressive. The yard's circumference was encompassed by tall, climbing roses, and the interior of the yard had rows of roses going horizontally and vertically, so many that I always thought that if you looked at the yard from above, it might even look like one giant rose. I was lucky she took such good care of the flowers. They were dense, with large dark blooms that shielded me from sight. I crawled as quietly as I could through the bush, pushing myself to one and another row before freezing as I heard the back door fling open and heard my mother's fervent steps stalk off towards the woods. I crawled into another bush and was able to see her stalk back toward the house and garden. She paused in front of the massive fire, her axe at the ready, and in the light, I could see blood from my ankles splattered across her face. After a moment of pacing, she let out a banshee war cry towards the sky before swinging her axe down into the rose bushes nearest to my window, the sad petals exploding like scarlet confetti all around her as she swung into the flowers. My flowers, you ruined my flowers. Beast, beast, it'll kill you, beast, she sobbed as she continued the manic exercise. I thought only about staying quiet until she tired herself out. Then maybe I could crawl somewhere safer, or maybe Dad and Toby would come back. Even if she did tire out though, neither of those plans would work. Nothing was close enough for me to crawl to in my state, and I would bleed out before my father and brother returned. It turned out though that none of that mattered. The thing inside me had ballooned to the size of a melon as I laid there in the rose bushes, and as I felt it wriggle around, I knew I wasn't big enough to hold it anymore. It began to push out of me. I crossed my legs to hold it in, but a long, sharp-tailed cord spilled out, startling a squeak out of my throat. After a brief moment, I felt my mother's delicate fingers latch down on my ankles, pulling me out of the rose bush and onto the lush green lawn, the fire like a dying sun illuminating her. She raised her axe above her head. "You will not win against me," she told me. "I never wanted to, Mommy," I sobbed. Just before she hacked into me, I saw her eyes see the tail of the thing, and her arms went limp, dropping the axe beside her. All that conviction, all that rage was gone in an instant. No, not a tailed one. She shuddered, barely audible. With my fear-stricken mother standing over me, I screamed as the rest of the creature squirmed out of me. The pain unlike anything I had ever felt before as its 8 legs pushed itself out of me. I half expected the thing to cry, but it came out hissing like a cockroach. The creature itself made an awful slurping sound as it finally exited my body. I brought myself up to my elbows and almost fainted. The thing was the size of a large cat, but more closely resembled a scorpion with 8 long bony legs and a sharp curled tail. Its body shape was hard to discern. It almost seemed jelly-like a plop of strawberry jam had grown legs and a tail. It observed me, I think, cocking its head, hundreds of dark eyes looking at my butchered form. Then it turned to my mother and seemed to know exactly what it wanted. My mother didn't run, but she did scream. With the fire blazing behind her, I watched as the scorpion-like creature sprang onto her, latching onto the center of her chest, where her heart laid, the attack making her drop to her knees. The color drained from her, not just her skin becoming sickly pale, but the red in her hair faded into a sad limp white. She weakly held her hand up as her pearl-smooth skin began to wrinkle, to decay. The blush of her cheeks drained like spilled wine. She glanced at me, her green eyes now lusterless, pink tulip lips dried like worms on the sidewalk on a hot day. As she fell, I heard her bones clatter against each other, the last noise she'd ever made. I thought then that I'd die next to my mother in her rose garden. But this thing that had grown in me that day had other plans. When my mother was sucked dry, it wasted no time skittering back to me. Back into me. I gasped, terrified, but it didn't hurt me. It saved me. I felt warmth run through my flesh like never before. A revitalization overtaking me. My ankle that had been split open sealed itself like it had never been struck. My thorn-ridden skin ceased its endless bleeding, but it didn't just heal. It made me better. My hair thickened and grew more vibrant. My skin became softer, and I think it even made me taller. I rose to my feet. My legs felt strong, and I felt strong, stronger than I ever had in my entire life. My eyes found what remained of my mother, and I realized why she was so scared and why no one in her family spoke to Carmilla. The thing had taken all this beauty and this strength from my mother, and given it to me. There's a lot I don't know still. Even after getting in touch with Aunt Carmilla, I don't know why the creature hasn't emerged since. I don't know why she didn't just kill me when she had the chance. Why she had to wait for the creature to emerge but gave up anyway. I don't know why Carmilla and I are carriers of it. Your Aunt Carmilla has 4 older sisters who didn't have it, and those sisters have daughters who don't have it. I've tried to figure it out, but the rabbit holes I've lost myself in have been fruitless and dangerous. What I do know, my sweet Rosie, is that you are the best thing that's ever happened to me. My little flower, how lucky am I to know you. You are so beautiful, smart, curious, and kind. I'd like to take some credit, but you are so self-assured all on your own. The way those clever eyes of yours always see more than what's on the surface. I know you noticed that Mommy is acting strange today, and I'm sorry that I didn't prepare you better. I think I got so distracted by the joy it was raising you that I never thought about what would happen if you were a carrier. Well, that's not completely true. I did think about it, but never for more than a minute. The truth is, I didn't care if you were a carrier or not. If the last thing I do on this earth is give you my vibrance, my beauty, my life force, then I can die with my heart full.
So, to my sweet little girl who woke up with a stomachache this morning and needed to stay home from school, know that you are not evil. You are not a monster. In a little while, we'll make a blanket fort and crawl under it together. I can see it moving around in your tummy, the little grapefruit. I'll try to explain it all to you as simply as I can before it happens, but I know it'll be scary and I'm so sorry for that. I know I should have warned you earlier, but Mommy was a little selfish and wanted to have a fun last day with you. So I write this letter for you, Rosie, so you know that you are not taking from me. I am giving, and I am overjoyed to do so. I am posting this here in case anyone else is a carrier or knows one and wanted to know they're not alone. To Rosie, Aunt Carmilla and Uncle Toby will be by tonight after to take care of you. I love you. I will always love you. And I feel like the biggest winner in the world just to have known you. Love, Mommy.
You really don't believe me? You're so immature. Leah hissed as she dug through her purse in search of her keys. Liam waited a few steps behind her, hands shoved deep in his pockets. He looked more hurt than angry. Not that Leah cared. "You seriously don't believe me?" he whispered almost to himself as he followed the girl inside the apartment. He stopped to shed his coat and shoes while Leah headed towards their bedroom, muttering something under her breath. He'd known better than to follow her when she was acting like this. So he instead decided to do something that was actually productive. He checked almost every window in the apartment, both the locks and the curtains. If Leah didn't believe him, that was fine, but he knew what he saw. He looked down on the street below him. It sat empty and dark, a stark contrast from the bustling hub it was during the day. So why did it feel like he had a million eyes in him? There was no one there. Stop staring out the window and start explaining, Liam. Leah's voice rang out. When Liam met her eyes, they were cold. He squirmed. She had a way of making him feel like a child being scolded by their mother. "I already explained it. In fact, I've explained it 3 times on the way back here." His voice rose more than he wanted to, but he was frustrated. He couldn't give her the answer she wanted to hear. She pinched the bridge of her nose and started to pace. Something she only did when she was trying to find the right words. "So you're sticking with that then? Everyone saw you creeping outside the windows. They said you would." "I wasn't there." He threw his arms up in anger. He could hear his heart beating in his chest, and it made it hard to focus on whatever it was that his girlfriend was saying. "I wasn't there. I didn't. They didn't see me." "Leah, they couldn't have." He was breathing hard, and it felt like just getting the words out took everything in him. He knew how it sounded. It didn't make sense to him either. But he couldn't have been there. It was physically impossible. For a while, Leah just stood there as if she was waiting on him to explain further. Or maybe she was trying to figure out if she even trusted him at all. Why would she? He sounded like a really bad liar at best, and a rambling lunatic at worst. He wouldn't believe him either, not if he hadn't seen it with his own eyes. It's like catching a glimpse of yourself in a reflection when you're running errands. Except it wasn't a reflection. It was Liam, sitting across the street at a bus stop. That was months ago. He stumbled upon the sight while he was the drunkest he'd ever been. It had been easy to explain then. He was drunk and hallucinating. He'd barely even thought about it the next morning when he'd woke up. He should have mentioned it to Leah then. Maybe if he did, she'd believe him now. The only problem was he told her he had to admit that he was blackout drunk. He'd have to admit that he'd broken his sobriety again. At the time, it didn't seem worth the trouble. Leah raised a brow. "So what you're saying is," she drawled, "you know for a fact it wasn't you outside, yet you don't remember where you were an hour ago?" He opened his mouth to interject, but Leah beat him to it. "And when I found you were on the roof of the apartment with no shoes on." It sounded like the gears were turning in her head, and was too embarrassed to look at her. "I wasn't drunk," that's all he could utter. He knew that's what she was getting at, but honestly, it wasn't important right now. He hadn't a drop in 3 days, or in 4 months as far as she knew. "So, where have you been sneaking off to, in the middle of the night?" she asked before he had any time to make up an excuse. He didn't know she knew about that. "That doesn't matter. None of that matters," he said almost pleadingly, as he tried to close the gap between them. Only he couldn't, because Leah kept taking steps back. It ended with her backed up against a wall. The only thing separating them was the dining table that they rarely used. For the first time, he looked at her, really looked at her. She looked terrified, so scared you would think he was holding her at gunpoint. The woman had spent 4 years with no longer trusted him. He let out a laugh that started as a chuckle but slowly morphed into hysterical cackling. She didn't believe him, and it didn't matter anymore because he didn't believe him either. He'd been trying to convince her for nothing. All of this was pointless. That was fine by him. "I wasn't drunk today," he started, closing the space between them quicker than she could create more. "But I'll admit I broke my promise. I'm sorry, darling." He interlaced their hands, ignoring the way hers shook in his own. He studied her face, looking for any sign of suspicion or at least confusion, but there was none. She had failed his test, and that could only mean one thing. This wasn't Leah, at least not his Leah. He'd never called her darling because her ex-husband used to, and she hated it. The real Leah would call him out immediately, maybe even stormed off if she was fed up enough. So who was this imposter pretending to be his wife? Was it the same thing that had met his nights all those months ago? All of this had to be connected somehow. What was he to do now that he lost the one closest to him? Well, hell, do what his does best, hit the bottle. So he sauntered over towards bookshelf and started pulling books off one by one. Slowly, as the space cleared the wall, safe behind it came into view. He punched in the code. There, wedding anniversary. The sound of the metal whining filled the silent apartment, and he made sure he stood off to the side enough for Leah to see the contents that lay inside. A 1968 bottle of gin and a loaded .38 revolver. He grabbed the bottle and unscrewed the cap, tossing it behind him. The familiar burn slid down his throat as he spun around, locking eyes with the woman behind him. She had moved closer to the door, so close that her hand rested on the doorknob beneath her. He couldn't let her leave because if she did, he had no way of finding the real Leah. This imposter was the only lead he had, and he wouldn't let it slip through his fingers. Not like last time. I don't think it was you who was outside, Liam. I believe you, okay? She took her hand off the doorknob, but she didn't move away from the door. She was lying and they both knew it, but he decided to humor her. That's a relief, because the real Leah would have believed me the first time I told her. He tilted his head slightly as he gave her a once-over. You are the real Leah, right? She nodded too quickly, eyes wide and unblinking. Of course I am, Liam. Who else would I be? He smiled at that. Not a kind smile. Well, see. My name is Allison, and I'm a snuff film star. No, I don't have the source for the movies, and before you ask, it's not mainstream porn you can find by just Googling my name. They're videos of me being murdered. Where would you even find those types of videos? The dark web? Maybe. I don't know. I don't like watching myself being murdered. What I can tell you is, I've starred in over 50 movies, and according to the guy who distributes them, I'm the most watched and most sought after snuff star in history. If that's even a thing, you're probably wondering how one would even get into that business. Well, the short answer is by accident. You don't wake up one day and decide you want to be murdered. In my case, I answered an ad, looking for an amateur porn actress. I was just starting out in the business, and the pay seemed reasonable. When I arrived at the location, which was a house in an upmarket location, it didn't raise any red flags. It all seemed legit until I asked to be paid up front, and the response was, let's see how you die first. Before I knew it, I was being held down and the cameras began rolling. All I can say is dying is like going to sleep during surgery. It's painful at the start and scary, but when your heart starts slowing down, you get a rush of euphoria and everything goes silent before the lights go out. I couldn't tell if there was an afterlife. I don't stay dead long enough to find out. It's like going to sleep without dreaming. There's a nanosecond of darkness before you wake up again. You would think that a guy whose business is death would be easily scared, but when I suddenly woke up as they were loading me into a shallow grave in the woods, he screamed like a little girl. It took some time to calm him down. You would swear it was him that was just brutally murdered with the way he reacted. But once the initial shock wore off, he looked me dead in the eye, no pun intended, and said, I'm going to make you a fucking star. I can go into details on how I get snuffed out, but I can say, the money is great, more than I could ever make being in mainstream porn. The problem isn't the fact that my employer is a death dealer of women. Actually, no women have been murdered apart from me, of course, since I started. The problem is the reaction I'm starting to get the more my popularity grows. The surprising thing is, the people who notice me are the most ordinary people you could imagine. Not monsters that hide away in the shadows, fantasizing about murdering women. I mean school teachers, doctors, and even young teenagers. The biggest shock for me was when I was sitting in a cafe and I was approached by a young dad who had his 2 young daughters with him. He sat staring at me while his daughters sat eating chocolate muffins. I knew why he was looking at me, even if he didn't. As I was finishing up my latte, I looked up to see him standing next to me with a strange grin on his face. Do I know you from somewhere? He suddenly asked. I was in my comfort clothes. A baggy t-shirt with a pair of sweatpants and the tattoo of a pentagram on my arm was on show. He began studying me to figure out how he knew me, and when I was just about to speak, he noticed the tattoo on my arm. It was like a light switched on in his brain, and he suddenly realized where he knew me from. His face turned deathly pale and he began to stutter a bit before he hurried himself and his daughters out of the cafe. I was never really worried about being noticed before, because the men that watched me expected me to be dead. I also never gave a second thought to my tattoo being the thing that gave me away. I mean, how many girls out there have the same tattoo? When I got it done, I was told it was a popular choice. That all changed when I got a phone call from my mother.
My poor mother had no clue about the type of business I was in. She always thought I was into some lifestyle stuff, like a trainer to the stars or something. I think the dream was better than the reality, and she always told her friends I was a successful businesswoman of some sort. Technically, she wasn't wrong. All that changed when she rang me in hysterics. She could barely contain herself over the phone. "You're alive, you're alive," is all she kept on repeating down the phone. After I calmed her down and reassured her I was very much alive, I waited until her breathing had slowed to a more relaxed state. "Allison." For a moment I thought I was speaking to a ghost. My mother was always my biggest fan in life, and it broke my heart to hear her this upset. "The police were here. Men in suits. Detectives, I think. They told me you were dead." "Oh, my sweet girl. They told me you were dead. They had found blood and something about a tape or the internet. The bastards gave me a heart attack. I knew you weren't dead." That night, I went to stay with my mother, just to reassure her that I was still physically present and to just hug her. Mainly to reassure myself that I was definitely still present in this world. Deep down, I knew what this was about. Of course, someone who wasn't a degenerate monster was going to watch my movies and try to put a name on the woman who should be somewhere in a shallow grave. But I always thought people would think the movies were just great fakes, because you can only be the star of one Snuff movie, not 50. A few weeks had passed, and apart from my mother losing a year or two of her life, things had settled down. I had decided to quit. It was never going to be a long-term thing, but if I was going to stop, my final movie was going to be my best. Go out with a bang, I always said. It was the day of the shoot, and on the way to the location, I couldn't escape the feeling I was being watched. I put it down to my nerves because I was going to die in the most brutal way possible. It was going to be so bad. No one was ever going to think it was faked, and the fact it was going to be the last video of me made it sound all the more believable. I knew it was going to be painful, but the pain never lasted, and all I was thinking was, it's going to be a spectacular death, and it was. But as the euphoria swept over me and I began to slip into the darkness, I watched as men in SWAT gear burst into the room, followed by men in suits. As always, I came back to life with a big gasp of air, like a baby taking its first breath after being expelled from the womb. I was expecting to be in the room where I was murdered, but this time I found myself on a cold metal slab. As I looked around what looked like an operating room, I saw two men in suits. One was smiling, while the other appeared to hand over money from his wallet.
"Hi, welcome back. I just bet my colleague $50 that you would come back from the dead," he said as he put the note into his top pocket.
"I must say I am a big fan of your movies. Damsel in the Dungeon is my personal favorite," said the smartly dressed man as he smiled down at me. This was the first time I had ever felt in danger. A sudden panic washed over me as I tried to get up off the table. The two men in suits smiled at each other before handing me a hospital gown. "Where am I?" I asked nervously. "You have nothing to worry about. It's not like we are going to kill you," said one of the men as they burst out laughing. The two men walked me to an interview room and sat me down at a table opposite them. "You still haven't told me who you are and my reasons for being here." The two men adjusted themselves into a more serious posture. "Sorry for the confusion. My name is Agent Harris, and my colleague here is Agent Butler." I look across at the two young agents sitting across from me as their frozen expressions fixate on me. "Agents? Are you FBI or something?" I nervously asked. One of the agents gave a disgruntled laugh as if I offended him. "Close, we're with the CIA. What do you want with me?" I didn't know dying was illegal. The two men sat upright as one of them put a picture of a woman in front of me. "We need your help with a delicate situation. It's of the utmost importance to the security of this country." I looked down at the picture of a woman who looked strangely enough like me. Apart from her expensive-looking attire and different-colored hair, we had the same facial features and we looked to be the same height. "The woman in the picture is the wife of the Russian Minister for Defense, Sergei Shoigu," said the agent with a sound of urgency in his voice. "What does this have to do with me?" I asked. "She has a lot of secrets that could be very important to us. The problem is her husband isn't a nice man. Fortunately for us, he treats her like a dog. So she wants a way out of the marriage. But being the man he is, he's not going to let her go so easily. I still don't get what this has to do with me." The two agents look at each other before fixating their stares at me again. "Sergei is a very powerful man. Even if we got her out of the country, we couldn't guarantee her safety. The only way we could do that is if we faked her death, but it has to look convincing, and that is where you come in.
It suddenly began to make sense. I remember a guy friend of mine who was big into conspiracy theories and would always bang on about how the moon landings were faked in a studio. So, would I be correct in thinking you want me to make another movie, given my special talent? The two agents look at each other again, but this time with a smile. She catches on quick. I'm beginning to like her already. I picked up the picture again and stared at the woman looking back at me with pain in her eyes and a painted-on smile. How much does this gig pay? The retirement home I work at isn't normal. Hello. I really shouldn't be writing this, but I need to get this out there. The retirement home I work at isn't normal. We take in people and things that aren't exactly normal. One of my favorite patrons of the Arden home is Esmeralda Tooten. It is well known that she was a famous serial killer in the 70s. She targeted mainly single mothers with twins. Her most famous murder was the Ascon family. In 1979, also one of her last murders before being sent into retirement. This murder was the first that she started to experiment with torture. She said she did this because she was a twin herself and her mother heavily abused her. Not the most exciting backstory, I know. But there is other interesting stuff around here. This place also has a bunch of cool objects that are said to be haunted, or even cursed by the devil himself. Like, we have a typewriter that if you close your eyes and start typing random letters and numbers, you can find out how you die. I'm supposed to die next week, which is why I'm writing this. The help at this place never lasts long. I'm actually considered a veteran, even though I've only been here for 3 years. There's no point fighting the typewriter though. People have tried, of course, but no matter what, the typewriter never fails. I knew someone that was killed by a falling piano. As cartoonish as that is, he did live in a nicer neighborhood, and I guess fancy people need their pianos moved. He was on his way to work too. I have to go take care of Mr. Malone now. See ya. Hi. Mr. Malone was getting out of hand. He was the infamous San Antonio scalper. He would find people that he thought had lovely hair, stalk them for a period of 3-5 days, then scalp them and take their hair. He made some pretty interesting stuff out of them too. One of my favorites is his black hair ghillie suit that he would use for stalking people. He would also make ropes to restrain some of his murder victims. He wouldn't kill the scalped, but anyone with bad hair, he would kill. He does not like redheads, which is the reason we don't hire any. Not after Jenny, at least. Jenny was nice, but to Mr. Maloney's credit, she had great hair. I guess she didn't look up where she was working, but she went missing after only 2 days. Malone walked around with a newly strung necklace after that. I guess a lot of you may be wondering why serial killers go into retirement and not, jail or hell. I don't really know either, to be honest, and the owners refuse to tell me when I see them. Some of the dishwashers around here have a theory that we are in hell, but with how much stuff they smoke, I pay them no mind. They are fun to hang out with though. I haven't read what the typewriter said about me. I'm not ready for that yet. I've had others look at it, but all they say is that they are sorry. Weird, right? Anyways, I still have work to do, and my break is almost over. Bye for now. Hello again, here I am. Hi. Our psychic Miss Pusho came up to me and told me something strange. She said that I was going into retirement soon. Odd, since I'm only 22. She was, however, very insistent. She isn't often wrong. I guess I better buy a lottery ticket. Oh, wait, I'm going to die soon, so why am I retiring? Anyways, I guess I'll tell you how we deal with our more difficult patrons. As I said in the last entry, Mr. Malone often targets people with nice hair, which is why it is recommended that each employee gets regular haircuts, all paid for by the company. He gets a little hair deprived and starts trying to scalp other patrons, which is when we have to step in. Usually we just drag someone out from the basement whose hair has grown nice and long. Sometimes we just toss him an employee though, if he's really upset. Normally one of the underperforming staff that has hair that can hold him off long enough to get someone out of the basement. Their performance usually improves after that. We have procedures like that for every patron. The basement is a labyrinth of horror, and it is often that people will get lost in there. We've recently bought trackers for cell phones to prevent this. It's been very effective. Our procedure for Esmeralda is also very particular. We have to retrieve either an actual family of a single mother with twins, or people that look close enough and drop them off somewhere in the building. She then hunts them down. This happens once a month, and they usually escape the premises before she can get to them. They lived very happy lives in the basement though, and sometimes they get Stockholmed into coming back, hoping that they can go back into the basement. Outside life is pretty hard. Those people get killed pretty quickly. Speaking of coworkers, let me tell you about some of them. The first one is Bruce. Bruce is the only other veteran around here besides me. He's been here 5.5 years and is looking like hell get a promotion pretty soon. Promotions are cool because you get some pretty big perks, as well as being able to deal with more patrons. Most people don't take promotions. I don't know why though. Bruce says he'll probably turn his down, but I keep telling him not to. Bruce has only lasted this long, in my opinion, because he's 64, 310 pounds, and a serial killer. He goes for co-workers, which is how he got caught. Death can only follow you to so many jobs before it becomes suspicious. But yeah, he got sent here, to retirement. He volunteered to work for some reason. Then there's Millie. Millie killed a lot of kids. We don't like Millie here. Jeffrey is pretty cool. He hasn't done anything weird, which I guess is pretty weird itself. People have to be pretty off to want to work here. The dishwashers are the worst. Nothing here is ever clean, and they always smell like drugs and rot. They look like corpses, and at this point I don't even know how they get to work. I can't stand them. I got promoted. I have a busy week ahead of me. A promotion, retirement, then I have to die. Being a manager is tough. I have about 5 more days, so expect more stories as I get closer to the death date. Being a manager comes with some pretty cool perks. I get an extra minute on my break, and $2 more per hour. I don't do this for the money though. I do this out of love for the patrons. That, and it seems like this place calls to me when I'm away from it. I find myself waking up here even though I went to sleep at home. I guess that's what will make me a good manager though. Becoming the manager also comes with more responsibilities. I am now in charge of more of our patrons, as well as our haunted objects. One of my favorite new charges is Tommy the Talented. He used to belong to a famous ventriloquist before he was found dead. The cause of death is unknown, but if you go on certain online forums, many people have the theory that the doll is responsible. I find that silly, as I don't believe that Tommy would do anything like that. He has his own room here, and we are told to treat him like any normal patron here. We bring him 3 meals a day, bring him down to participate in group activities, and he leaves requests outside of his room. He slides notes under his door, or something does. We never see him move, but we have to knock before entering his room. I think that he is alive, personally. Another object that I take care of is the Widow's tea set. In a room at the end of the top floor's hallway sits the Widow's tea set. On the floor, there sits 3 cups, with a teapot in the middle, in between 2 chairs. What most people wouldn't know is that the 2 chairs are a part of the tea set. That's right, 3 cups, 2 chairs, 1 teapot, no table. That's the tea set. People say that when you sit on the chair to the left, pour tea from the pot, and look into the cup, instead of your reflection, you can see how to prevent your death, but for a cost of something dear to you. When you look into the cup while sitting on the right chair, you can see your new death, which will either be faster than your original death, or your death will be delayed, but even more painful. My job is to make sure that the door to the room stays locked. Another important aspect of the managerial work is making sure people keep the place semi-clean. We live with a different sort of clientele, so deep cleaning is basically pointless. We do have a monthly cleaning where we call in crime scene cleaners, but they've stopped coming after complaints of harassment by the patrons, so now all cleaning duties are left to the staff. Managers don't necessarily have to clean, but I wouldn't feel like a good manager if I skipped out on the dirty work. I don't think that he'll be alive for the next cleaning though, which is a shame. People around here have been acting weird around me. I'm not sure if it's because I'm a manager now, or if it is because I'll be dead soon, but my co-workers seem to be being extra nice to me, even the dishwashers. The patrons have been acting odd too, like talking about a retirement tea party. I don't like parties for myself. They make me feel self-centered. I got called into the boss office today. I was super nervous, but it turns out he wanted to congratulate me before I retired. I told that I was also supposed to die soon, and he seemed pleased. He said that it was all according to plan, and to do what feels natural. He asked if I wanted time off, which I vehemently denied. I never want to stop working here. We had a great conversation, which was a first for me. Talking to a goat-headed statue, I mean. After meeting the boss, I've decided that I don't want to die anymore. I told him I don't want to stop working here, and I meant it. I think that he'll go to the teapot. I guess he'll tell you some more about the job before taking my gamble. How about getting to know some of the managers? Yeah, that should do. First up are the twins, Manny and Manny. They would normally be easy to confuse, but they are conjoined at the hip. Probably makes getting dressed pretty awkward, huh? The Mannies are pretty chill, just do not look at their hip or their hunchback. Then there's Jaylee. She's less okay. She doesn't join in on cleaning, but loves to tell people how to do their job, even though she doesn't know what she's talking about. She sucks. I tried to talk to the boss today, but they said he was out. He's been out almost all day. He moves around a lot for a statue. I don't want to die, and I know what I have to do. The only way to cheat the typewriter, the widow's tea set. I unlock the doors and sit on the chair to the left. I'm ready for whatever cost I have to pay. I'm writing all of this before I pour the tea. See you later.
I got out.
I'm home. I poured the tea, looked in, and my boss called, making me drop the cup, almost breaking it. He called to say that while he was sad that I chose to resign, but hoped I planned to move on to bigger and better things. He said that if I ever need a reference, I can always put the Arden home down. Patrons are rarely let out of the home. Employees are told to never visit the homes of other employees. I say this because as I'm sitting writing this down, people are knocking on my door hard, telling me to come out, to tell them why I quit, that they had a party planned for me. I don't understand. I should have prevented my death. I gave up my job. I should get to live. I'm going to open the door. Maybe they just want to talk. They don't. They said that they'll let me finish writing this, but then it's time for tea. If you're driving alone at night and the road signs start to distort, you've entered 7 Turns Road. Here's how to survive. If you ever find yourself driving alone at night, maybe after a night drinking with friends, getting off work late, or pushing yourself to reach a distant destination, refusing to stop for rest, and suddenly you're on a road that doesn't appear on your GPS or map, unsure how you even got there, you may have unknowingly been selected by 7 Turns Road. Take a deep breath and follow this guide exactly. I've traveled this road myself many times. There is no turning back, no stopping, only forward. First off, you need to understand something. You were chosen, and I have no idea why. There are no rituals, no secret incantations or hidden routes to memorize. Believe me, I've looked for patterns. I've tried to outsmart it, and I've failed every time. The truth is simple and unsettling. You'll never find 7 Turns Road intentionally. It finds you. At first, it's subtle. After making just one turn, your original route blends seamlessly into an endless stretch that feels both familiar and surreal. It doesn't matter where you were originally heading. You'll know with absolute certainty you're truly on 7 Turns Road when the temperature abruptly plummets and roadside signs blur, warp, or become nonsensical, dreamlike symbols, distorted letters, upside-down markers. You'll feel it deep in your gut. Don't fixate on the signs. That's how it tricks you into losing control. You can slow down, even stop briefly. Hell, if panic sets in hard enough, you can step outside for a breath, but never ever make it a habit. Those who get comfortable leaving their vehicle don't tend to survive. Read carefully, memorize these steps, and accept the reality you've entered. The only path out is straight ahead. Continue along the road. Wherever you started will feel somewhat familiar, yet increasingly distant. Eventually this stretch will lead you to a second turn. Your car's radio will switch on automatically. Attempts to turn it off or adjust the volume will fail. At first you'll hear faint white noise that gradually evolves into a woman's soft muttering, indecipherable gibberish that slowly transforms into coherent words, spilling out your darkest secrets, hidden truths you've told no one. I was terrified the first few times, but keep your eyes glued to the road. Your headlights are your only illumination, and you cannot afford to crash. Ignore the woman and drive until the next turn appears. By the third turn, any lingering familiarity of your surroundings will vanish entirely. A dense, oppressive forest will surge upwards, its thick, tangled branches arching overhead to form an almost suffocating canopy, enclosing you completely. On either side of the road, animals will appear, standing impossibly still. A fox, a squirrel, a bear, a bird. all fixed like grotesque statues. Their empty, hollow eyes will lock onto your every movement, heads slowly pivoting in unnatural synchronization as your vehicle passes.
Keep driving. Do not acknowledge them. They aren't animals. Not anymore.
They're mere husks, puppeteered by the road itself as silent watchers. If curiosity compels you to glance again, and trust me, you shouldn't, you'll notice those husks beginning to distort, melting as if made from wax beneath a relentless flame. Fur sloughs away in thick, wet clumps, revealing slick, gleaming surfaces beneath. Like dark, chitinous exoskeleton, eyes liquefy, dribbling slowly from their sockets in streams of viscous decay. The forest around you fills with the sickly sound of dripping, the quiet cracks and pops of joints shifting beneath unraveling skin. Eyes forward. Keep your foot steady on the gas. Pretend you don't see them, because I assure you, they see you. At the fourth turn, your fuel gauge will begin to plummet alarmingly fast. Your headlights will flicker intermittently. Remain calm. The road is enticing you to exit your vehicle. Do not. You're safe if you remain inside. Your speedometer will become erratic, but maintain a steady, comfortable speed. The radio's whispering will grow louder, clearer. The woman's voice will narrate every tiny detail of your existence. Each blink, heartbeat, every breath you take, even the sweat dripping down your back onto your seat. Pay her no mind. Your focus must remain solely on the road until the next turn. On the fifth turn, a gentle snowfall begins, serene at first, softly coating your car. Normally it might be calming, but the snow quickly intensifies. You'll notice your hearing fading alongside the thickening snowfall. The harsh wind buffeting your vehicle will abruptly stop. Your engine sounds will disappear, followed by your own panicked breathing. All you'll have left is a faint ringing in your ears. Visibility deteriorates until your headlights barely illuminate the blizzard. This snow goes on endlessly, miles upon miles. Do not look to the sides. Those silent, shadowy silhouettes will crawl toward your slowly moving car, attempting to pry their way inside or distract you into veering off the path. If you panic and leave the road, there's no returning. Some shadows will dash suddenly in front of your car. My advice? Pretend they're not there and keep driving. Eventually you'll encounter a sign, ever-changing, surreal, similar to those at the first turn. Each glance away alters its appearance, but it signals your sixth turn. Right after passing this shifting sign, turn right immediately. Do not miss it. On the sixth turn, your hearing will gradually return. The relentless snowstorm, which seemed eternal, will abruptly cease, melting away rapidly and leaving you alone on the road. The road itself will deteriorate, becoming rough and worn before shifting into gravel. Your car will shake violently, rattling over every pebble and rock. Soon these sounds will grow louder, heavier, disturbingly similar to the snapping and breaking of bones beneath your tires. An open field will suddenly stretch out around you, filled with hundreds, perhaps thousands of tall, dark figures. Initially, you might mistake them for dead, leafless trees, but they will begin to slowly, unsteadily move toward your vehicle. The smallest of these entities tower nearly 10 feet, while the largest stretch close to 20. Their elongated forms resemble charred bone fused with twisted bark. They possess smooth, featureless faces and deep, hollow mouths, emitting anguished voices, cries, screams, and pleas of those you've loved, lost, or failed. You'll feel an overwhelming urge to stop and help them. Resist it. Accelerate as quickly as possible. The sound of cracking bones beneath your wheels, combined with their sorrowful cries, will make this turn one of the worst you've encountered. While slow, they will inch closer. Speed past them. As you approach the final turn, a profound sense of relief and accomplishment will flood through you. You'll feel as if you've narrowly escaped digestion by something monstrous and spat back out into safety. This turn will be deceptively beautiful, almost rewarding, adorned with climbing roses and vibrant flowers. Euphoria will briefly fill you until your headlights begin to flicker. Your dashboard lights flash erratically, and every warning signal activates simultaneously. Your vehicle will abruptly die, coasting to a complete stop. With one final flicker of your headlights, utter darkness, deeper than any you've known, will consume you. This is the final test. The road will determine your fate. Remain inside, silent and still. You'll soon hear tapping and knocking against windows, doors, even beneath your car. Countless entities will circle and inspect your vehicle, breathing heavily and scratching at the exterior. Hold tightly to your steering wheel. Do not brake or attempt to restart your car. Your car will begin shifting as they're pushing it towards something immense. You'll hear shuffling footsteps rapidly retreat. Fearful, then, something massive will open wide, though invisible in the darkness. You'll sense its enormity. Your car will shift downward, your stomach plummeting as adrenaline floods your veins. A sudden drop will follow. Your vehicle will slowly descend into something terrible, crushing and grinding around you. You'll hear the car being chewed apart, the metal shredding. Sharp edges will puncture through the floor, roof, and sides. Something will scrape your flesh. The vehicle will compress tighter, the roof pressing inches from your face. The sound of destruction deafening. Then, with a final sickening spin, you'll plummet, spiraling until consciousness fades. You'll awaken gasping on a quiet roadside, the exact place 7 Turns Road first claimed you. Feel the grass, the dirt beneath your fingers. Breathe deeply. You survived, for now. But surviving once doesn't mean freedom forever. I've traveled this road more times than sanity should allow, and each escape comes at a heavier price. Keep this guide safe because the road won't forget you. Even as I finish typing this from the supposed safety of my driveway, I look up, and where my house should be stands an endless road stretching onward, signs distorted and beckoning. 7 Turns Road calls me again. My wife will not stop eating. April Chapter 1. My wife's sickness. I texted in a group chat with all of my friends. Are we ready for tonight? Everyone responded agreeing that they couldn't wait anymore. How all of them would get drunk and have the best time of their life. We had a party for one of our other friends. Just stupid guys stuff. Hanging out. The fun adult life. I was getting ready to party with all my friends tonight. Food, alcohol, games, and more good stuff, if you know what I mean. I dropped a big cooler by the front door, and I heard a sudden loud thud from upstairs. I ran up to see my wife on the floor, holding her stomach hard, like she could squeeze out her own organs. I ran up to her, asking if she was okay. She only grunted and whimpered, like someone had just attacked her. I grabbed my phone and called 911, asking for an ambulance. I was with her the entire ride to the hospital, holding, gripping, tightening her hand with mine. She was in pain and I couldn't do anything. I didn't even know what was happening to her. After a few hours of waiting at the hospital, impatiently walking around the room, waiting for any kind of news, it felt like days, until I heard the click of the door opening. A doctor walked inside of the room with a chart. I asked, "William, finally, what the hell happened to her?" The doctor sighed, looking at the chart again. "Doctor, we don't exactly know. Her stomach seemed to have just grew a few inches. You'd normally see this in a long-term effect. Gas, toxic waste, fluid buildup. It also looked scarred." "William, what? Like something cut her stomach?" "Doctor, and healed it in a matter of minutes. It's not something that even we can explain. But what we can do is offer her a prescription of probiotic supplements. Something to help her pass waste easier, and maybe something to help with the pain." "William, what else can we do? This isn't normal, right?" "Doctor, he'll say, give it a few days, 2-3 weeks maybe. Come back and we'll see how everything is." "William, right, thanks doctor." I took her home, made sure she was staying in bed to rest, and made her take her pills. She hates pills, but she needed to. I unfortunately had to cancel of my friends last minute. They whined, but I didn't really care at that moment. My wife was in pain. Something strange had happened to her, and I felt sick to my stomach. This feeling of weakness, unable to do anything, I need to wait and see what stupid fucking pills are going to do. Sorry. Stress of the job was why I was excited to go out with my friends. We went back home, and I had trouble sleeping. My wife kept making weird clicking noises and stomach grumbles. I tried waking her up a bunch. She wouldn't wake up, so I eventually tuned it out and went to bed. April I woke up today to my wife, well, on the toilet, vomiting and shitting. She was sitting on the toilet holding a bucket in her lap. It was like this for an hour. I went outside of the bathroom after 10 minutes of pauses between long coughing and gagging on her own vomit. I couldn't take it. I called the doctor again, asking if this was in any way, shape or form even possible for someone. He told me that, "Doctor, it's possible the sudden change in her stomach caused something to make the pills more effective than needed, and to just be by her side with water. A lot of water. Another 10 minutes passed by of god-awful sounds that I couldn't bear to hear it anymore. I wanted them to stop, but if they did, I'm worried of what that would mean. No, I have to be there for her. And finally, I ran into the bathroom, holding a cup of water near her and putting my hand on her shoulder. "William, honey, are you all right?" She breathed out weakly, trying to grab the cup. Of course, I helped her, moved her head back and poured some water slowly inside of her mouth. It smelled awful in there. I didn't care at the moment. My wife looked like shit and all I could offer her was a cup of goddamn water. She choked on it. I grabbed a few tissues and cleaned around her mouth. I had the curiosity to peek inside of the bucket and noticed a red liquid mixed with everything else. I knew it was blood. A lot of it. How could it not be? But there were a lot more fluids combined with everything. After a long 6 hours of cleaning everything, the toilet, the bucket, the bathroom, the shower, my wife, I told my job I couldn't come in for a few days. My wife was sick. I got a bit of an attitude from my boss, but I didn't care. My wife was my importance. She was my priority. I loved her, even with everything going on. She had not prayed today. I knew she was a Christian. So were her parents. She was born into it, raised with it. When I hadn't seen her put her hands together like she always did, even when sick, especially when sick, I didn't like that thought. I put her to bed after everything she asked me, coughing like she was about to spit out her lungs. "Erica, could you get me something to eat?" My eyes widened a bit. The pure shock of that question. I'm not sure why it affected me so much. The thought of vomiting all that time. How could she even eat? But thinking about it, how could she not eat? Her body was probably the most fragile and weak that it's ever been. I agreed, told her I'd get her a bunch of different stuff. I went downstairs. We had a lot of leftovers because, well, we ordered a lot and didn't cook much. I brought her a box of half-finished pizza, mashed potatoes, a brunch leftover we did last Sunday, a few drinks and a bunch of other things. She started eating them like her stomach was on the verge of eating itself. She chomped down on everything I had brought her. I didn't think of it much at first. In all honesty, I didn't know what to think. I was worried about her. I was just happy she was eating after that horrible morning. April 20. She was in bed all those days. I called around families, friends, anyone who could potentially give some sort of explanation of what was going on. She was eating and eating. I had to order $200 worth of food for her. And only her. We only had 2 meals so far. I'm hungry too, but not as much as she is hungry. I've been texting my friend Tom. I've known him since we were kids. He's been as helpful as he could be. What could he really do? I let him know how she was, how things were, and what mostly was happening. I was tired. Every time I closed my eyes, I heard her yell out to me. She was hungry. I told her a few times that the delivery guy was a few minutes away. I was tired. I already said that I hadn't slept for a long time. 36 constant hours awake, blinking away from collapsing, hungry and worried. I hadn't even realized by then, but my eyes and body felt so heavy. It felt like tiredness was adding extra weight to my body, and then, without even realizing it, I woke up joltingly and looked around. It had only been 2 hours. It took me a good minute to remember what was going on. My wife, the food outside. Right. I got up and got the food at the door. It had piled up. I'm sure they were probably asking questions. It didn't matter. I picked it all up and brought it upstairs, keeping a few things for myself. I turned on the television and began eating. I had a bunch of fried stuff from everywhere. I just needed to eat something. I heard her upstairs eating, crunching, savoring, like she had never eaten before. I wasn't disgusted, but I was concerned about what I was hearing. How could this happen? Why was she like this? I shook it off and took a few bites of my food until I realized something crucial. I had ordered fried fish. I must have ordered it without even realizing. I just picked a bunch of food. It didn't seem to matter to her, and I was tired. My wife is allergic to seafood. Anything that is fish, it could kill her. I dropped everything and ran upstairs, practically launching myself into the room. I even thought about breaking the door down. Thankfully, I didn't, but I entered the room, yelling at her to not eat anything. But she had eaten most of everything, including the seafood I had ordered. William. Shit. I'm so sorry, honey. I didn't realize I ordered fish. Where's your EpiPen? I looked around frantically. Everywhere. Anywhere. And she looked up at me. Erica, what do you mean? I feel fine. It's been like 10 minutes. I feel fine. Really? William? Sat bother you? What? What do you mean? I went up to her and looked at her. She did seem totally fine. The fish somehow hadn't affected her like it did back when we were younger. She had to go to the hospital for practically a week, needed help breathing and everything. I stayed in the room for another 5 minutes with her to make sure she was fine. I had the EpiPen ready, just in case. I don't know what was worse. The feeling that she was going to react at any point, or that she just continued eating. Chapter 2. Experiences. April. I was downstairs texting Tom again. Even he was baffled. He was aware of her allergy. It says online that in a few rare cases, allergies can leave the body or with a lot of treatments and pills. Not the ones my wife had gotten. And she hadn't left the house. Hell, she had left the bed since she came back from the hospital. I was officially concerned about everything. I thought this would have gone away after yesterday, but after the fish incident, I'm not sure what to think and I'm on high alert on everything. She asked me at first to get more seafood. She wanted to try it. I was reluctant at first, but eventually agreed. Maybe this was her way to actually get better. A very small part of me thought it would have been over after a few more days. I cooked up some of the salmon I bought and brought it up with her pills and some water. She barely waited for me to put the plate down and started eating. I thought she was about to bite into my hand. I was startled a bit, but I quickly put the pills to the desk with the water. William, don't forget to take your pills. Erica. Right. Yeah. My pills. I walked back downstairs. I had the EpiPen ready next to the drawer next to our bed, just in case. But I never needed it. I admit I crashed down onto the couch and fell asleep. All the sudden energy from last night with my sudden panic about what I let her eat boosted me up, and well, now it finally got to me. I'm not sure what had happened, but when I woke up to an awful chewing sound, crunching and chewing. It was night. I had slept for maybe 10-12 hours straight. I got up and walked to the kitchen. I turned on the light, seeing my wife eating the rest of the salmon that I had bought, except I hadn't cooked that one yet. Raw fish isn't exactly bad for you, sushi and such, but seeing it just in action, it felt haunting. This was the first time since that day that I had seen her out of bed. I was a bit relieved, but afraid to approach her. She looked up at me, chewing. God, I hated that noise. The disgusting gooey noises it made. The wild, sadistic tearing of meat and other materials through her teeth. Erica, hey Will, sorry, I figured you fell asleep. I just got so hungry. I didn't want to bother you. I saw you on the couch and decided to get something. William, it's fine. How are you feeling? Erica, mostly hungry, but hey, I'm working on it. Sorry for making you overwork and everything. William, don't worry about it. It's just about making you feel better. I'm glad I can help. I forced a smile on my face. I'm not sure why. Why didn't I just smile? I was happy to make sure she was healthy. Erica, he'll stay here for a bit, grab a few more things, if that's okay. William, maybe actually you could calm it with the eating? I'm spending a lot of money to give you so much food in so little time. I understand you can be hungry, but this isn't normal. Erica. Well, I don't know what to tell you. I'm just in a hungry mood. I need food. William, then I'm taking it out of your account. I can spend all this money on just food. Try to eat less too. I walked upstairs into our room a bit pissed. Before I started my ascend, I heard clicking from the kitchen. I looked back to see my wife still eating. I brushed it off thinking it was just background noises and went up to our room. I expected it to be filthy, full of trash. When I entered the room was clean. Only the best was filthy, and the room smelled like if you walked through an alley of dead animals. Where did all of the boxes ordered and bags gone to? I started taking off the sheets and put them in the washer. I used some Febreze to cover up the awful smell. I don't know how she lived in this room for 4 days now, just eating. As always, whilst waiting, I texted Tom, telling him about everything that had happened up until now. This time though, I actually called him. I needed to hear someone's voice. Anything but the disgusting damn chewing and crunching I heard for the past days. William. Hey man. Sorry for suddenly calling, I'm not doing too good. Tom. No worries man, it's completely understandable. A lot of weird shit is happening on your end. How is she, by the way? William. I don't know. She seems physically and mentally fine, just eating so much. She took out the trash. She can get out of bed, just doesn't. The doctor told us to give it 3 weeks, but I kind of want to bring her back sooner. Tom, I'd say to call them, let them know what's going on, that you're worried for her, and Well, from what you told me, you spent a lot of money and have not been earning much. How much longer can this go on?
William, yeah. No, you're right. I'll call them, get an appointment, get this whole thing fixed. And one more thing. Tom, what's up?
William, I need a camera, like a nanny cam or something. April 3rd, my friend Tom got me a camera to set up inside my house in the living room and in my bedroom. From time to time, I checked to see my wife chomping down on the next food I had gotten for her. I didn't watch any longer than that. Reminds me that I tried getting her to the hospital today so that Tom could set up the cameras. She did not want to leave the house. The doctor had to come over on his day off. I apologized to him. He went to check out my wife and he had somehow brought Erica outside long enough so that Tom could set them up. Afterwards, the doctor told me that she wasn't eating properly. She was losing weight. I chuckled sarcastically. William, are you fucking serious? All she's been doing is eating. I'm down $500 in food only for her, and you're telling me that she has not been gaining weight. Doctor, something she might be doing, not actually eating, maybe, or exercising when you sleep. The best thing you can do is keep helping her. Make sure she eats. William, she's in bed all day? She watches TV shows about cooking, for God's sake? We talked for another 10 minutes. I had denied that Erica wasn't eating. She was eating. I know she was. My wife didn't exercise. She watched what she ate. She didn't eat too much or too little. She had a good metabolism. Something was wrong. Deeply wrong. That night, I even checked my suspicions. I had spent way more than $500. I had to stop spending so much from whoever's account. This was an absurd amount of money to spend on food for 1 week. First May, she's eating again. I don't know what she was eating. Her hands were covered in a substance, but it was meat that I could smell, either expired or something else. I went to bed at around 8 p.m. last night. I slept on the couch. I thought I'd check the cameras, see what they picked up. I checked the live feed of her eating like she was a king. Had food everywhere, like I hadn't even cleaned the sheets. I had ordered her a few things again, not knowing what she had eaten yesterday. Kind of freaked me out. I made sure to order extra. I had made some breakfast for myself before doing so. I looked at my eggs and pushed the plate away. I couldn't bear the thought of eating. I reviewed the footage. Christ, I was almost thankful I hadn't eaten my eggs. I would have thrown them up right after. At 9 p.m., she had gotten up from the bed, walked downstairs to me sleeping on the couch, and she just stared at me from the stairs. I sped up the footage, stared at me for 2 hours straight, not moving an inch, her eyes darting me through the dark. After exactly 2 hours and 13 minutes, she suddenly moved to the kitchen. I couldn't see anything. I should have thought about putting one there, but I could see a tiny bit into the kitchen. She was looking through the fridge, anywhere that could have food. She couldn't find much, canned food and such. Midnight. She was done with most of everything. Sauces were left. Condiments, powdered products like soup and spices. A few minutes passed by of her gathering all of it. She couldn't possibly, right? As I thought, she couldn't do what I thought she was going to do. She did exactly that. She opened the lids and packets of all of them and chugged them. I couldn't see her face, but I could see her chest and her arms. I knew what she was doing. I closed the laptop immediately. I could hear the loud and horrifying gulps that were thudding inside her throat. I choked a bit, gagging. It took me a good hour to recover from what I had just seen and heard. But even then I was disturbed. I'll never forget it. I sent the footage to Tom. I wasn't crazy and I needed someone to know what was happening to my wife, and I had to know what my wife was doing to herself, hopefully seeing why she was doing this. I took a breath and continued watching this cursed footage of a woman seeming like she was poisoning herself from 1 a.m. to 3 a.m. She drank and ate cleaning products, charcoal, strong alcohol like it was nothing. The cooler that I had brought for the party, I hadn't emptied it. She ate all the food in it, drank all the beers, alcohol, and even ate the weed I was going to bring. She didn't smoke it. She ate it. She desperately looked around for more things to eat. She went back upstairs. I switched cameras to saw her eating the bags that once held the food she ate. That's how she was getting rid of the boxes and bags. She wasn't taking the trash out. She was eating them. Plastic, cardboard boxes, paper. I could feel my heart race, pumping faster. I was panicking. What happened to? No. What is wrong with her? After her feast, she stopped and looked down at the floor in a weird way, and I realized after a bit she was staring at me. Not at the camera, but me downstairs. She knew where I was. She knew exactly where I was at that moment. I knew she had watched me, but the sight of it felt like a hunter stalking its prey. I closed the laptop once again. I couldn't. I didn't want to know what the hell was upstairs pretending to be my wife, pretending to be human. I could feel every hair on my body standing. I was on edge. I was scared, afraid. Every and any question was popping into my head, sending me into this crisis. I had to get a grip. I had to know this was real. I rubbed my hand with my fingers, feeling everything around me. My smells, my mouth, my touch. I started panicking even more. But then I saw a picture on our wall. Upon seeing it, I remembered a lot about my wife. Everything that we've lived together. When I met her parents, how nervous I was when I asked her to marry me. I breathed out like I hadn't sucked out air in forever. The relief, but then the sudden realization hit me even harder. After this was real, this is happening. I had to keep ordering food for it. Keep it at bay, keep it here. Chapter 3. The Monster in My House. May 3rd. I went out yesterday after all of that. I took an extra day. Spoke with Tom about the situation. He told me to potentially get out of the house for a few days, in which I agreed. I didn't take anything with me. I took my phone, wallet and keys, and left the house. I went to my parents. I explained that I needed a break from Erica. I didn't tell them exactly what was going on, but I told them that I needed to see them. I can connect the cameras to my phone. I was afraid to check, but inside me I needed to. How far would this go? She could actually take the... After forcing myself to eat what my mother had made me. It wasn't bad, but thinking of eating only made me think of what I had seen my wife do to herself. I had a lot of water to force everything down my stomach. I looked at my phone and opened the surveillance app and looked. I almost dropped my phone on the floor. My face went white. My whole body froze. She was on the couch, eating the fabric, tearing through the leather on the covers, the cotton inside. I could see the kitchen and it was ravaged. Everything was open. Glass was shattered. The doors of the cabinets almost broken off their hinges.
What the fuck?
I whispered out, trying to cover my words. Mom. What's wrong, dear? I spaced out. I didn't even realize my mother was standing near me. I looked up at her, hiding my phone. William. Nothing. Mom. Sorry. Just Tom sending me a stupid photo. Mom. Oh, I see. Are you alright? You look tense. Do you want some iced tea? Yeah. I'm fine. My job is just a tad stressful. Nothing I can't handle. I promise. But no thanks. I have to get going. I once again forced a smile on my face. I hated it. My own mother. I couldn't tell her what was going on. How could she understand? The video seems like enough evidence yet. No, I couldn't bring her into it. I had to take care of myself, whatever that meant. I left the morning after telling them thank you for taking care of me. But I had to talk this out with Erica, of course lying. I went to someone hoping maybe someone had some answers. Her brother. I asked him what had happened to their family, seeing if anything could relate to my current problem. Erica never talked about them. I only met them when I was younger, and they had died a few years before I married her. He was a bit hesitant at first, but he told me he didn't know much about what had happened either. Ray. I wish I could tell you, but the cops only said that they disappeared, or missing, and to not hold out hope. Me and Erica just accepted it. Not much we could have done. Their house was emptied out. Nothing from the past or from now was found. William. Nothing was found. Ray. Not a single object. It looked like an empty box, like a newly constructed house. William. Something wrong is going on with your sister and I don't know what to do. I thought you might know what was happening. Ray, wait. What do you mean? What's going on? I thought about explaining, but even I had trouble believing me in my own words. So I showed Ray the footage and he was taken aback. He was horrified, but he looked like it didn't affect him as much as it affected me. Ray, our dad, texted us too, saying that our mom would not stop eating whatever she got her hands on. He didn't have video, but we never believed him, or we thought he was talking crazy. We didn't think God. William, what do I do? What can I do for her? Ray, not sure. This isn't normal. Can anyone even do this? Can anyone come out of this alive after ingesting all of that shit? Is it even Erica anymore? I thought about it, how it could even be real. How could it even be her anymore? She had drunk cleaning products and looked as healthy as ever. That's not human. Not anymore, at least. William,
What do I do? I can't just leave her there. What if she eventually leaves the house? She's already tearing up the furniture. Ray, I don't know, but if that thing was also responsible for my parents' death, and now somehow is infecting Erica, the best thing to do would be to try and kill it. I hated to say it, thinking it could still be my wife, but I agreed. This creature needed to be put down. It needed to be killed. I left the house, not wanting Ray to be a part of this. I took my car and left to a gun shop. I didn't own a gun, but I had a license. Never thought I would have had to use one, especially the person I loved the most in life. I got a Glock 17, nothing too fancy, something quick. I headed home. I wondered what went wrong, what had happened to us, and what caused this. So many questions and yet so little to no answers. I didn't even know if that thing eating my couch was my wife anymore. If it was even, I don't know what it was. And it insulted me by mimicking my wife, our memories together. I arrived at my driveway and immediately knew something was wrong. I walked up to my door, and it was gone. I already had my weapon ready for whatever was waiting for me. I walked inside on edge. I aimed at every little noise or movement my ears and eyes could catch. I was nervous and scared. I didn't know if I had what it took to do it. The living room was cleaned out, and I don't mean the room was cleaned. It was empty, completely empty. Had she eaten everything? I walked into the kitchen. Same thing. All the cupboards were empty. The microwave had no more door. Everything that wasn't nailed down or could be removed easily was gone. I went upstairs. Same thing. My bedroom was cleaned out. Not a single crumb of whatever that thing considered food was left. I think it didn't eat the house because it would have raised even more suspicions. The house looked like no one had ever lived here. Portraits, clocks, furniture, and the newly placed cameras too. Nothing. And the worst part, she wasn't there either. I ran outside in the backyard, and I heard the neighbor's kids screaming. I turned to look, seeing something that resembled my wife on all fours, biting down on the kid's arm, having it fully inside of her mouth, like it had no throat to cough on, just a mouth. The thing looked like my wife, but its teeth had been broken, making them sharp. Its eyes were wide, like they hadn't slept. Its torso was mostly bones, at least of what I could see. It was dirty, dark, and expulsed by the most awful smell of rotting meat, waste. It itself was dead, yet it needed to eat. I was horrified, but I mustered the words, screaming at it. "William, let go of her." I shot at its leg and the bullet hit it. But it didn't puncture its skin. The bullet didn't go through. It just stopped, slowly being dragged inside of its body like it was eating it. This gun was useless. I put the gun back in my pants and I ran over and hopped the fence, grabbed a wooden bat that was on the ground and grabbed it. I played a bit when I was younger. Let's say my swing was brutal. I swung at the thing's face and it clunked, hitting full force, even breaking the bat. All three of us fell down. It let go of the girl's arm and she ran off into her house, calling out for her parents. I didn't really want to or have the time to think about why that had worked. I took the rest of the bat and plunged it into the chest of the thing. It screeched this unholy scream and kicked me off of it, absorbing the rest of the bat into its stomach. It sent me crashing into the fence and I blacked out for a few minutes, and that's all it needed. I came back to the creature being gone and the door of the house was gone. I stood up and went inside of the neighbor's house. It had been cleaned out or eaten out. William. God damn it. No. I crumbled to my knees knowing what it had done. I was about to give up until I heard that loud, disgusting clanking of teeth, tearing through material, gnawing into its stomach. It hadn't left the house, the noise it made. It never left me. I knew it was that monster, but what else could I try? Bullets didn't work, melee weapons either, but maybe, like any other wild animal, any other savage beast, I stood up and ran to my car and opened the trunk, grabbing a fuel canister. I had it in an emergency just in case. We ran out of gas on the highway one day on vacation, and I made sure to always pack an extra in case. She always made fun of me by packing extra just to be careful. I closed the trunk hard, staring at the gas can. I only had one way to light it. Chapter 4. My wife was eaten. I entered my neighbor's house and poured gas on every entrance, windows, every possible exit so it couldn't get out. But before I could reach outside, its long, disgusting hand grabbed me. Its fingers felt like knives slowly slicing into my skin. It threw me back inside into the wall. I looked up at it, and before I could take out my weapon, it pinned my left hand into the wall with its sharp finger. I squealed in pain and looked up at this greed creature. I still didn't understand. Why?
How these hundreds of questions, these thoughts rushing into my head, were suddenly silenced by my own voice as I spoke to it.
William, what are you? What are you? What are you? Why were you pretending to be her? I know you're not her.
I heard it quickly gasping and wheezing. It was laughing at me. Like the answer was obvious, I felt fear and rage growing inside of me. But it opened its mouth slowly in an unworldly way. In all directions, its mouth started growing, expanding. I was looking at an abyss that I was going to become a part of it. Then the little girl suddenly stabbed the creature at the top of the head. I could see a sharp, broken piece of wood sticking through inside its mouth. It yelped out and backed away. Looking at the girl, it screeched, shouting so loud it roared through the entire house, shattering the windows. In that quick instance, that sharp pain in my hand I felt when it nudged its claw out gave me the adrenaline rush, and I took out the gun from my pants and shot at the ground, igniting the fuel, and the thing turned its head back at me. I was somehow able to move out of the way. I ran for the kid and jumped out of the window. It hurt a bit, but nothing to what I had been through for the last week. I kept her safe, and so did her parents before dying of that monster. I told her to leave. I told her to get as far away, anywhere but here. William, get out of here, kid. Go. Get somewhere safe. She took off running on the sidewalk away from the house that had caught fire. I could hear it inside, screaming, trying to get out. I turned around and walked away, hoping it was over. But the thing is smarter than I believed. It jumped out of the second-floor window and crashed onto me. It was burnt, revealing its actual body. It was horrifying. I can give much detail, but this thing, it spoke. I couldn't understand a thing. It spoke in tongues, or another language. It kept me inside the house, knowing I wouldn't get out now. I had accepted my fate. It'll burn. They'll burn with it. But I had to try something. Couldn't let my life go out in vain. I could see inside its body through its mouth. Like I saw before, a complete abyss. Nothing of light could be coming from deep inside of this bottomless pit. It grabbed me and I couldn't move whilst it forced me down its mouth. I probably bled out inside its stomach. The police and firefighters soon arrived. They had found the little girl and started putting out the fire. The house was finished, but not like there was anything worth it there. The thing was gone. There was nothing, no one, but an empty burnt house. The police kept both houses on lockdown and even evacuated the neighborhood. Everyone there was asked to stay with family or friends. A few days into the investigation, they had apparently even found a few blood spots in the forest near William's house, all identified to be animals. They had also found half-eaten carcasses of raccoons, cats, dogs, whatever else you could find outside. Even a deer. She was probably caught in the action. A few months had gone by and nothing had happened more. Everyone was moved back into their house. A missing case was closed for William and Erica. Of course, to no avail. The case went cold. And 2 years later, still nothing. The house was rebuilt. New people had been moved into the houses. And I don't know if William is dead. I'm hoping. I don't know what I'm saying. I'm hoping for his sake that he is. God, please let him be dead. I don't want to know if he is. I think the thought of this story having its own ending, my ending, I guess I'm going to find out what happened to him soon anyway. It's been 2 years since this happened to my best friend William. I've been the one writing this story. I've read his texts and reviewed his footage multiple times, police reports and everything else that was given to me, that I was able to access legally. I've also talked to Ray, Erica's brother, the little girl that survived, and the investigators that were on the case. My name is Tom Drumming, and I'm writing about what happened to my friend, William. Because yesterday morning, my wife went to the hospital and today I saw her on the toilet, and she's been there for almost an hour now. I can hear her vomiting. My neighbor's basement is hiding something awful. I naturally fell into babysitting around the age of 14. Through friends and family, I got leads for babysitting to score some cash, which definitely beat having to work at a restaurant. The job had its ups and downs, but overall it wasn't a bad gig at all. Yet, as many good experiences as I had, they were all eclipsed by one night. A new family in town talked to my dad at work, and it turned out that they needed a babysitter. I happily took the job and found myself watching their 10-year-old boy a couple of weeks later. There was nothing out of the ordinary about the family themselves. They were the model citizens of suburban America, complete with the white picket fence and blue shutters. Nothing about their house was strange or even unique. Their son Avery was very mild-mannered and polite. Even their car was basic. Not that these were bad things, but I expected it to be a very boring night. What I did not expect was the uncomfortable, inexplicable feeling that I got when I set foot in the house. A chill ran through me, but there was no draft. I rubbed my arms as I gazed at their staircase as we passed. They gave me a brief tour of the house before they left a note of instructions and all the usual information I expected from a job. While trying to figure out what was making me so uneasy about the place, I noticed something about their basement door when I passed it. A padlock was placed on the door, along with a deadbolt in place. "Any questions?" the father asked as my mind was pulled out of my curiosity. "No, sir. Everything looks great." So they left, and Avery and I played some games before I made dinner. A couple of times, I thought I heard Avery call me into the den. Both times, I found him sitting on the couch in what most recognize as the TV zombie state. He denied having called me, and I went back to making dinner. After the third time, I told Avery it wasn't funny and that he should stop. "I'm not doing anything. I'm just watching TV." His voice went to that higher tone of pleading, sounding desperate for me to believe him. "Avery, I know it's my first time and sometimes you want to test things out, but I'm trying to get dinner ready, so if you call me again, I'm not checking on you, okay?" I didn't say anything. The child glared at the TV with a pouting face, and I began to feel bad. As many times as I've heard lies, I was starting to sense that he was telling the truth. So what was I hearing? "Hey, it's fine. I'm not mad. Promise." Avery turned his head back towards me, seeming to test if I was the one fibbing now. "How about I let you stay up a little later if we forget about it?"
Do you really promise?
Pinky promise. With our contractual pinkies interlocked, spirits were raised again, and I was able to finish dinner. Although I didn't finish without hearing Avery's voice calling me once more. I ignored it, and when Avery didn't mention it at dinner, I figured it was him fooling around again. The whole time we chatted as we ate, I couldn't help but feel that something was not right about this house. As hard as I tried to not look, my eyes kept diverting to the heavy padlock and chain on the basement door. Curiosity got the best of me, and as we were cleaning up, I couldn't help but ask, "So Avery, what's the deal with the basement door?" "What do you mean?" His words did not match his demeanor. It was obvious he didn't make eye contact as he forced his sentence out. "Come on, you know what I mean. The padlock, chain, and deadbolt. Y'all have dangerous chemicals down there." Avery's face grew paler and he stared at the wall for a moment. "Hey, it's okay. You don't have to tell me. I didn't mean to. Dad said no one can talk about it anymore." This really threw me off and I couldn't possibly finish my sentence now. A thick veil of tension materialized between us. "So you guys aren't allowed to talk about it?" Avery shook his head. Okay, that's cool. No big deal." It was nothing but a big deal. Was their dad doing something illegal down there? Or was it something strange that no one could do anything about it? Maybe their dad was in denial about something going on. There were way too many questions going through my head now. "Hey, how about we put on a movie?" "Yeah, sure. What am I saying? Everyone likes movies, right?" Now excited, we decided on a fun movie that quickly pulled our minds away from the mysterious basement door. Well, that's not entirely true. Maybe Avery was distracted, but it was killing me. As we ate popcorn, I couldn't help but watch Avery, wondering what was going on in that little head of his. Was there something awful going on in the house and there was nothing I could do to stop it? Or maybe the dad was just, "Stop," I told myself inwardly. Mulling over it all endlessly was not doing myself any favors. So the movie ended, and I ushered the drifting child to his bed. Now, the house was all to myself until 12, so I had a good 3.5 hours to myself. Immediately, I began texting my friend to tell her all about the weird experience I was having that night. She dismissed it, saying that I was getting spooked by a new place. This annoyed me to no end. I'd been at bigger, way creepier looking houses, but never got weird vibes like this. Then, I heard it. "Stephanie." I went instantly still and listened intently. "You didn't hear that, Steph. Just keep texting your friend and Stephanie." There was no mistaking it this time. It was definitely coming from the basement. The acoustics couldn't have been from Avery upstairs. The voice sounded like a little girl's. In fact, I'm not even sure he could make his voice like that. Anyway, slowly, I stood up from the couch and approached the door. Maybe, like earlier, I was just hearing things. Maybe Being creeped out by the house was starting to mess with my head. That made sense, right?
Stephanie?
I jumped back from the door, almost wetting myself in the process. There was no way I could dismiss it as anything else now. There was a little girl's voice coming from the basement.
Hello?
I responded. I couldn't keep my voice from shaking.
Is this Stephanie?
Why, yes, it's Stephanie. Can you help me?
Who are you?
Why are you locked in the basement?
My name is Meredith Rosenberg.
They kept me locked up for a long time now. The police were almost onto them, and that's why they moved. Can you get me out? A cold shock washed over me and made it hard to respond. Was I actually babysitting for a family that kept a little girl prisoner? Oh my God, how long have you been locked up with them? Ever since I can remember. I felt somehow hot and cold at the same time and wanted to throw up. This all made sense now with what Avery had told me. Of course his father didn't want him talking about the door. I just need to find the keys and I can. They're hidden in the garage underneath the metal shelf. It's inside a magnetic key holder. Okay, just hold tight. In a panic to free the poor girl, I darted into the garage and began feeling the space underneath the bottom shelf. And sure enough, there was a magnetic key holder there. Running back, I popped the key holder open and began to insert the key into the padlock. Did you find it? Yes, sweetie, I'm almost there.
Oh, please hurry. Sometimes they come home early.
This sent me into even more of a rush, and I barely managed to fumble the key into the padlock. I finally heard the successful click of the padlock, pulled the chain off, and slid the deadbolt to the right. Incoming, Meredith. Hold on. I turned the doorknob and threw open the door, only to be met with darkness. Now, full of adrenaline, my hands felt around for the light switch. Finally finding my purchase, I flicked the light on which lit up most of the stairs. Meredith, I called out. Unless I was remembering it wrong, it sounded like her voice was just on the other side of the door a minute ago. In fact, it was quite strange that she wasn't waiting for me at the top of the stairs. Wouldn't you immediately run out of a basement that you were locked in for God knows how long? In down here, the little girl's voice called out. Judging from the distance, it sounded like she was calling from somewhere at the bottom of the stairs. My brain suddenly began piecing all the details of this interaction together, and the idea of going down into the basement became absolutely terrifying. Meredith, you can come up now. The doors open. I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. Why I was scared of a little girl was beyond me, but much like the house itself, something felt very wrong here.
I hurt my leg, aber so not.
When you said you were getting the key, I went back down to get some of my things and got hurt. Her sounds of pain filled me with sorrow, but an invisible force was holding me back from taking another step into that basement. Can you move? Maybe pull yourself up on the railing? I can't. It hurts too bad. Okay, sweetie. What's wrong? Won't you help me? It's just really dark down there and I don't want to get hurt too. Is there any way you can get to the stairs? Any way at all? I tried to sit up, but my shoulder hurts too much. Thought you said your leg got hurt. The words hung in the air like a noose. It was only after I said it that I realized there were several things seriously wrong about all of this. A question popped into my head I didn't even have time to think about until now. How did she know where the padlock key was? A deathly silence took up the space between me and wherever this girl was. It was a standoff and I couldn't think of anything else to say. There were questions I could ask her to figure out what was happening, but I felt that her answers weren't going to be honest. Perhaps at this point the truth was too frightful to know. Meredith, are you still there? It was a stupid question, but it was the only thing my mind could conjure. The additional silence only unnerved me, so I decided to try and get a better look. Fishing my phone out of my pocket, I clicked on the flashlight. It didn't do me any good because of the awful range, so I did the one thing I'd already told myself not to do. I took a step forward. Maybe it was the angle of the stairs or the lighting, but that one step gave me more information than I ever wanted to know. I caught a better view of the bottom step, which was essentially a ledge into a black abyss. Something looked different on this step, but it took a second to register what it was. The step was wet, a pool of some unknown liquid overflowing into the darkness of the basement. I knew for sure that the father hadn't mentioned any flooding, so it would be way too random for that. So I stood there, watching in frozen curiosity as the puddle then suddenly rippled, and I realized the abominable truth. It wasn't water. It was a puddle of saliva, and something was drooling into it from the dark. A wretched chuckle emanated from the horrid void beyond the step, and it cemented me even further into place. It was a wet chortle, and positively evil. "How did you like my voices?" the thing said from the dark. "I've been practicing." The epiphany creeped down my spine. It was now talking in Avery's voice. Everything in my body screamed at me to run. I heard the screams, but I couldn't respond, no matter how hard I tried. A pity though. Almost got you. At this, the most gruesome face peeled back the shadows and revealed itself, along with its unearthly mandibles and small fountain of saliva. My faculties finally came to, and I threw myself into the house and kicked the door closed. In mere seconds, I had the door bolted and chained. Leaning against the door, my chest heaved as I struggled to catch my breath. Just as I felt I was safe, the door shuddered as a terrible blow rocked it. I screamed and ran upstairs to grab Avery. I practically dragged the poor kid out the door and called the police. It wasn't until the operator came on that I realized I was about to report a monster in the house. Thinking quickly, I told them that I heard a burglar in the home. It wasn't long before the police and Avery's parents came home. Nothing was found, even in the basement, but I didn't even care at that point. I just wanted the hell out of that house and away from whatever that thing was. Avery's parents kept glancing at me funny the whole time, probably because they knew I had their basement key. I shoved it into their hands before I hugged Avery and got into my car to drive home. That poor kid has to live in that house with that thing, but there was nothing I could do about it. As long as I am alive, I will never ever set foot in that house again. And as for basements go, I can't go into them anymore. I just simply can't. I saw something in France. I think it followed me home. I left to France in June 11th. I hugged my mom goodbye and went off into the airport, looking for my chaperone. After a long wait and meeting some of the people I would go to France with, we boarded the plane and headed there. We did your typical stuff you do with a tour guide. We visited monuments, took a lot of pictures, and ate food, bought souvenirs. The first days were wonderful. I met some new friends as well. Casey was actually part of my group, and so was Angie, but I didn't really talk to her much. Me and Casey got along really well. We also became friends with another group from Texas, two girls by the names of Ava and Ella, who were cousins. The five of us became our own little group. Me being the only male of the group was quite fun. The other boys at the trip were either quite nerdy or hung out with others. We went shopping and they even bought stuff for me and gave me clothes to try on and dressed me up in ridiculous fashion. I loved the attention, being that I haven't really talked to a girl since I broke up with my girlfriend 3 months prior, and it was still fresh in my mind. After a couple of days exploring Paris, our final day we visited a cemetery. Our tour guide tasked us with finding 2 graves of artists of some sort, so off we went. Casey and Ella went off to look for one, and left us for the other. Me and Ava, along with Angie, went to look somewhere else. The whole atmosphere of the place was quite relaxing. The birds chirped and there was tons of butterflies. I didn't bother to look for any random dead people, but rather appreciate the nature. Me and Ava just talked about school, work, life, you know. Typical teenager crap. Ava and Angie walked off and I decided to go up ahead and hide behind a tombstone to scare them. I came out and they weren't there. It must have turned into a different direction, I thought. I backtracked and I began to reel. I was lost. I then saw on my left an elderly woman sitting by a gravestone. Her sunken eyes looked like she hadn't slept in months, and her clothes looked filthy and tattered. Something was off about her. Without notice, she turned her head in my direction, almost instantaneously. I got a bit nervous. Bonjour, I say, but I don't think she heard. She just stared at me and began to twitch. I didn't know what to do, so I began walking away slowly. I was walking backwards and tripped on a root sticking out of the ground. I got up and the women stood as well. "Are you okay?" I asked, not knowing if she was able to understand English. She then slowly opened her mouth, but she never spoke. It kept getting bigger. "What the hell?" I said, and the old woman began to shriek in a voice no elderly person is even capable of making. She got on her hands and feet and started galloping towards me. I ran as fast as I could, leaping over fences and other people's graves. I could still hear her shrieks behind me. It wasn't until I bumped into Ava and Angie that the ordeal was over. "What the fuck is wrong with you, Nick?" Ava said to me. I was out of breath, dirty and couldn't speak. "I'm sorry," I said, panting. How was I going to explain what the hell I just saw? I would be made fun of. I told her I got lost and started jogging. "Well, watch yourself, dork, you could killed me," she said sarcastically. I was on edge for the rest of the day. "You okay?" asked Casey. "Yay, just tired, that's all," I replied. The thought of the ordeal slipped my mind, and we all had dinner together. Me and Casey usually ordered a glass of wine together, and all of us had a great time laughing. They, being girls, all wanted to know about my past relationships and such, and talked about relationship drama and other stuff teens usually talk about. We got back to our hotel and I was exhausted. I took a quick rinse and got ready for bed. "Yo, could I use your shampoo?" "I'm all out," Jack said, Jack being the person I was sharing my hotel room with. "Sure," I replied. "Thanks," he said, and shut the bathroom door. I put on some music and began to fall asleep. I felt myself drifting off as the music helped soothe me from the long day. I woke up cold. Even with my blanket, I was shivering. I tried checking the time, but my phone was dead. I turned around and saw that Jack was gone. He's probably in someone else's room. I plugged my phone in and began to fall back asleep until I saw it, standing in the door to the bathroom. The woman from the cemetery. The moonlight illuminated her wrinkly face. She twitched, and with each twitch you can hear her bones crack. Her breathing was raspy, and she just stared at me, blankly. I was absolutely terrified. She began opening her mouth until the cheeks ripped. I bolted out of the room and slammed the door shut. I turned around and she was on all fours right down the hallway. I ran towards the elevator. The elevator door began to close and she tried putting her long bony fingers between them. But the door managed to shut. The elevator began making its way to the first floor, and it stopped. The lights went out. All I could see was the illuminated buttons on the panel. Then the door opened. It was pitch black on the other side. What the fuck is happening to me? Why me? What did I do to deserve this? My thoughts were then interrupted by the raspy breathing coming from the outside. I began pushing the close button, then punching it, praying to God it would close. I heard the footsteps, then running, then the sounds of shoes and hands hitting the floor. The elevator shut, and the lights turned on. But behind me was that fucking thing, and I screamed. I woke up with my heart beating out of my chest. I checked the time, and it was 6:50. 10 minutes until my alarm went off. I got ready and headed down for breakfast. I was soon joined by my friends, and we all ate together. Casey looked at me as we sat across from one another. "You don't look well," she said. I could tell she was concerned, but I don't think she would believe me if I told her some old bitch chased me in all fours. "I had a nightmare and didn't get to sleep too well," I said. "Can you tell me about it?" "I don't remember. I just woke up from a nightmare of some sort. I'm fine. Where are we headed to next?" I didn't feel comfortable trying to recall the nightmare, so I tried changing the subject. "Someplace with a castle, but I don't know what it's called." "Dummy. Whatever." We sat next to each other on the bus, and we were headed to a place called Chartres. Me and Casey talked for a bit, and I ended up falling asleep against the window. I woke up, shivering cold. I couldn't move. What the hell? I glanced forward and saw the hag staring at me. She started walking down the aisle, shambling. I couldn't move. I couldn't scream. The hag was approaching me, bones cracking with every step. That raspy breathing, her dead gaze. She got to my seat and leaned over about an inch from my face. She opened her mouth and her yellow teeth showed. The smell was horrible. It smelled like rotting meat. Her cheeks began to rip, and her teeth stuck out along with her gums. I could only watch in horror. But all of a sudden, I was jolted awake. "Wake up, sleepyhead, we're here," Casey said excitingly. I couldn't function regularly with that sight still in my mind. I tried my best acting normal, but I was paranoid. The town was beautiful and the food was great. I just needed to relax. That's all. But there was no way in hell I'm sleeping by myself tonight, or sleeping at all. After a long day of walking around and eating dinner with the rosé wine me and Kayla always order, I told her about my nightmares. I made up a bullshit story where I get really bad nightmares and it can cost me sleep. I also added that since my sleep patterns have been changed dramatically, it happens a lot. She was more than happy to let me sleep in her room. And since we switched hotels, Ava and Ella were gonna be sleeping in the room too. I took a quick shower and got a pillow and slept on the floor. They offered me a bed, but I didn't want to cost them their comfort. They handed me a comforter. I put it on the floor so I at least had some cushion. I plugged in my phone and slowly drifted off into sleep. I woke up with no incident. I was happy and well rested. I had no bags under my eyes. The rest of the trip I slept with them, on the floor, and it was night. We visited Amboise, a little town with a medieval twist to it. Then Normandy. Me being a WW2 nerd, it was really cool. The sights are way better in person than they are in pictures. It wasn't until the last day, the last fucking day, I fell asleep early, because our flight was at 6 in the morning for Minneapolis. I woke up and it was like someone threw a pillow at my face. You know those sudden moments where you are randomly jolted awake for no reason? Yeah, that. The room was pitch black, and I couldn't move. I felt a tremendous amount of weight on my chest. I was beyond scared, already preparing for the worst. The window was slightly open, and gusts of wind were blowing the curtains from side to side, showing the moonlight in front of me every few seconds. I saw her, whatever the fuck this thing is. But it wasn't standing. I was right over my face on all fours, about an inch away from me. I could feel her matted hair brush across my face as the wind blew. She raspy breathing was slow and deep. She began opening her mouth, slowly, and every time the moonlight showed her face, it looked slightly more inhuman. I thought I was going to die. I closed my eyes shut. I couldn't move a muscle. All of a sudden I could move, and the creature wasn't there. I turned on my phone light and looked around the room. Nothing. I checked the bathroom and there was no sign of her. I was still scared, and saw my friends still sleeping peacefully. Lucky asses, I thought. But I would rather have this thing come for than them. They were innocent. From that point on, I didn't fall asleep. I drank as much coffee as I could for breakfast and at the airport. I said goodbye to Ava and Ella. I was going to miss them. They were very nice. I added them on Snapchat and Instagram. It was just me and Casey now. On the plane I ordered coffee. Peeing sucked, but I had to stay awake. I just had to. On my way to the bathroom I thought I saw the woman, but it was my imagination playing tricks on me. I watched movies to stay awake, played games on my phone and would read, or at least try to. It was no use. I began falling asleep. Casey woke up 4 hours into the flight. "Did you sleep?" she asked me. "No." I said. I broke down and I told her everything. She looked at me in shock and said she was sorry. She said that she believed in me, and she held my hand and said she for me to sleep, and she would wake me if she sensed anything wrong. "You promise?" I said with uncertainty. "Yes," she replied. I put on a neck pillow and a blanket and began falling asleep. Casey's warm hand was a reassurance that I would be all right. I woke up from the touchdown and she was on her phone. She looked at me and smiled. "You okay? Did you sleep good?" "Yeah. Thank you. Sorry if I scared you. I think I was going crazy from the lack of sleep." "You're fine. Let's get out of the stinky plane." We both laughed at that. We met our chaperone and Angie at the terminal exit and got our luggage and boarded the next plane. I fell asleep on this flight and woke up to Casey waking me up. We were home. I said bye to everyone and said bye to Casey. She gave me a Polaroid picture of the Eiffel Tower. We hugged and she went to a different area to get picked up. Damn, I'm gonna miss her. My uncle picked me up and drove me home. I was still tired because of the time zone switch and jet lag. As soon as I got home, I crashed out. I was happy to see my mom and thanked her for the trip. I uploaded my pictures of all of us together and other random landmarks on my Instagram. Weeks went by and I totally forgot about the hag, until I started seeing glimpses of it, like my mind was playing tricks on me. I was watching a movie and I could have sworn I've seen it. I rewinded and it wasn't there. I was grocery shopping and thought I saw her in one of the aisles, but there was no one there. These sudden appearances began making me uneasy, and sure enough, I woke up one night with that same familiar chill. A sense of dread came before me. My room has a small nightlight, so it dimly lights up my surroundings. I saw it on the ceiling, its head turned around in a sickening way, where the head was facing the opposite direction from the body, staring at me. I couldn't move. It then dropped down on top of me. It crawled up to my face. I began to cry. This was it. There was no getting away from this thing. It began opening its mouth. I braced for whatever was about to happen. Then my dog came in the room and barked. He could sense it perhaps. I'm writing this to tell you I don't have that much time. This incident was 2 days ago. My dog was found dead this morning. I can stop this thing and no one believes me. I tried to my mom, but she thinks it's just lack of sleep. I've also tried talking to Casey, but she is in a different state seeing family. I don't know what to do. Whatever you do, don't ever wander off into a cemetery. You got that? I got this goddamn thing after me, and I don't know what's gonna happen to me. I haven't slept since the incident, and I'm extremely sad my dog died. I've buried him in my backyard. Perhaps I will meet the same fate as him. I'm growing really tired now, and I can hear that raspy breathing behind me. Well, this was my shot at a scary story. Let me know if you guys liked it. This is based on true events such as sleep paralysis that gave me horrible nightmares while in Paris. But I had a great time. If you enjoyed it, let me know. Thanks. That's it for tonight's stories, but the nightmares never end. If you enjoyed these chilling tales, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss a new upload. Got a scary experience of your own? Share it in the comments. I just might feature it in a future video. Until next time, stay safe, stay curious, and remember, some things are scarier than they seem in the dark.